this meeting to order. This is and welcome everybody to the Town of Carlisle Board of Selectmen's meeting of Tuesday, December 10th, 2019. We'll start with community input. And I'd like to remind everybody that community input, we cannot respond to at the time that it's given. We do take it. If it warrants being put on an agenda at a different time, we do that at that point. If it is something about an agenda item that we're having on tonight or the night of, we will take the community input and we will take it under consideration during our discussions, but we do not, in general, ask for community input or audience input in our discussions unless there's some question that we have. There is at 7:05, an update about Timber Nook program, 7:45, a public hearing for the Verizon Eversource joint pole location on Church Street. At 8 o'clock, a public hearing for the underground storage of propane at 383 River Road. At 8:15, we will have a joint 2020 town meeting, coordination meeting of the Selectmen, FinCom, the Long-Term Caps Requirement Committee, the Municipal Facilities Committee, and the moderator, and maybe the school committee. At 9:15, Town Government Organization Policy and Bylaw Review, as we have every meeting these days. At 9:35, Town Administrators Report. 9:45, the liaison reports. At 9:55, minutes. And we will not be having an executive session because we don't have the minutes to review, right? Okay. So although it's on our agenda, it's not happening. Hopefully, we will be adjourning instead at 10 o'clock. So I'm going to really try to keep this meeting moving because we do have a lot of heavy agenda items to discuss tonight. So it being 7 o'clock, is there somebody here for community input? David and Abba? And please identify yourself for the cameras and the TV.
I'm the chair of the COA board. I'm here today to kind of talk about the position we had requested for us outreach social worker, part-time outreach social worker, and we feel that it is a very important staff position that we really need. I have been involved with council on aging for the past 10 years, and I have seen how the need has increased over the years. Our current program manager and outreach coordinator, Angela, she has been working extremely hard, and she has been with us for all that long. But if one day she decides to leave, we will need to really hire 2 more people to do what she's doing right now. And she is at a place where she's kind of burning out. We have to support her. A lot of our board members are here in order to support this. And David is here. He can talk in more details about this.
Hi, Abba. Thank you. I'm David Klein. I'm the director of the Council on Aging. I'm not a town resident. But I also I wanted to reiterate what Abba was saying. The position from our perspective is not one of a want. It's really, truly a need. You could have said that it was a need 4 years ago or 3 years ago, but we've been putting a Band-Aid on it each year by adding a little bit of capacity through our administrators and giving them additional responsibility. And I'm not sorry that we did that. I think, Angela has passed along parts of what she does to them, and it's built a stronger team, such that if one day she retires, we could possibly hire externally, but we possibly could promote from within. So it's a good thing. It's made the town stronger, I think, in effect. But the part-time positions don't that are of a wider, broader capacity don't replace the need on the social worker side with the social worker and outreach expertise that this point that we've come to. We were just reviewing something from Minuteman Senior Services a little bit earlier in the day today. It's their FY 2019 report of the services that they give to the town. and comparing it to one from 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, they were giving us about $250,000 worth of services, and they break it down by category. I can get it to you guys if you want the soft or hard copy at some point. But this past year, that figure is about 320,000 or 317,000. And one of the big increases was in-home care of people in Carlisle. They're providing in-home care and care management services. And the increase in numbers seems small. It's like it went up from 23 to 31, but that 23 to 31, that extra 30% or so, 35%, are people that almost certainly we are dealing with on a daily basis, and Angela is dealing with on a daily basis. And it's those families that are, I hate to use the word sucking up our time, but it's those families that need the immediate care because one spouse is gone and now the other spouse, who might have been the original caregiver, needs help to stay in the community. At the same time, if you want us to come back, or if you want me to stay for the FinCom portion of it, I'm happy to stay, or happy to come to the next meeting to give more facts and figures. But basically, we think that for this position, which might cost $28,000, that we can cover about $10,000 through the community chest grant. And for the first time, we've had discussions within our board about using half of our state grant, the state formula grant, which is currently at about $12,000. It used to be $7,000, then $8,000, then $9,000. Now we're up to $12,000. And we think with the 2020 census, once we get past that, that we'll probably get an additional amount from the state, because it's based on the number of seniors in town. The number of seniors in town has gone up about 60% in the past 10 years. So chances are we'll get additional funding. And if we could use, let's pick the figure, half of that amount toward this position, we think that it is worth it. So if we can use $6,000 of our $12,000 now toward that position, and maybe if it goes up 25% and we have $16,000, if we can use $8,000 of our $16,000, I'm using that as an approximate benchmark, but if you get where I'm going, other towns do use their state grant toward positions. We traditionally in Carlisle haven't, because it hasn't been a lot of money. But now that it is becoming more money, it's reasonable to look at it and say, well, is there a real need that you would use that money to fund for? What we've been using it for in the past has just been miscellaneous things.
What would be the balance then between your community chest and half of the?
Well, if we had both of them, that would be $16,000, just to pick an intermediate figure of the $28,000. Yeah. So it would be about 55% of what we'd ask for. And you might say, well, could you use less hours of this additional position? But the reason that we're asking for the 19 or 19 and a half, just going up to that total part-time threshold, is that we need a critical mass of that person's hours. We need to hire somebody who's willing to come in. And even if they're saying, well, we can only do 18 as opposed to 19 and a half, totally fine. But we don't want to not be able to get somebody qualified. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay.
And also, we have a couple warrant articles that we were considering on the transportation end, but this is our real priority. And if we had to sacrifice something, it would be here on the outreach and social work side, and we would manage on the transportation side.
Okay.
Just want you to know. And lastly, traditionally, and this feeds right into what you're trying to do, I think, as both the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, and that's get things done a little earlier in the process. Well, the community chest, last year the application deadline was January 31st. This year, and I think it affects not only us, but Board of Health a little bit too, this year the deadline for that application is January 10th. So if we're going to apply for additional funds to them, and they've indicated that it would work, Concord's getting about $38,000. We got $15,000 this past year. If we go up to $25,000, just to pick a figure, we need to know what we're applying for, as opposed to not knowing.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here for public comment? Input?
I would make public comment.
Please,
I'm Thomas Dunkers. I once was a member of the COA. I was also a caregiver. Now I'm in need of care. And it's not a desirable position. I call up Angela many times, and she responds late at night because she's so busy during the day. Now, I think any help she can get be well appreciated. I know that through her, she's a community angel as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of other people feel the same way. And to deny her adequate resources is just beyond my belief. I wish I could still be a caretaker and not a caretaker. The other kind of caretaker.
Caregiver and not a caretaker.
Life is catching up to me. So all your help you can give, I certainly would appreciate, and I'm sure a lot of elder people that I know would also appreciate. Remember, you are also getting older. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Seeing none,
Oh, no, she raised her hand.
oh, I'm
Here.
sorry. I'm sorry. Please come, yes, because that microphone is for the cameras so that people who are watching at home can hear what you're saying.
I better not have the camera on me.
So I need your name and your address,
Okay,
please.
I'm Hannelore Munson, and I have been living for 57 years on 48 Wildwood Drive. And I have to say, I had a husband with dementia, and anytime I called Angela for help, sometimes just to talk, she was always available, and if she wasn't, she would call me again late at night. And I am just really, really worried about her being the kind of person that she is. She wants to do an excellent job, and she always has, but I think it's now taking it out on her health, and I would hate to see something happen to this absolutely wonderful person. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No. I appreciate all that input. We have an update about the Timberneck Nook program. Come and join us, please. You have to drag up a chair. Or you can stand there or drag up a chair, depends upon how long your presentation is.
So good evening, I'm Sherry Kennan, and this is,
I'm Maggie Lindeman.
we're here from Timbernook, which is a program of Minuteman ARC. And we wanted to give a quick update on our program that we've been running in the woods, and ask to extend hours for the summer to run 5 weeks of summer programming. And I don't know if you all got the handout or not. Did you get it with the dates? The proposed dates? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So we ran 2 successful sessions this fall, along with 1 evening session. They were attended very well by a lot of Carlisle residents as well that really enjoyed it. And we have a couple of deadlines we have to meet, which is why we're coming now and asking about summer. Acton Boxborough, or Acton, has a camp fair that's very widely attended from all the surrounding areas. And that is January 23rd. And so we really would like to have our dates and our place in place for marketing. And then Timbernook itself opens up registration on February 7th. So we are here asking permission for these 5 weeks of programming for the summer. And that's why we're here, and to answer any questions
Okay.
anyone else might have.
How's the snow been doing?
We haven't been out in the snow yet, but we do have snow programming. But yes, we haven't been out since it snowed yet.
Just some cold rain.
Yeah, we did have some cold rain, and the kids did great. The moms too.
Tim, do you have any input from the point of view of the, town hall, impact on town hall, and, or
Well,
anything else like
It
that?
hasn't really impacted
operations here at Town Hall. They've been very easy to work with. I know they were very responsive to the issue that Nathan had raised.
Yeah,
on
no,
behalf
I'm
of
just,
a number of residents, so.
I'm going to bring that up.
Yeah.
and if you
But
understand the
it
timing
happened, and
issue
that's
of
okay.
Wanting to advertise for the
Right.
summer, believe
No,
it or
no,
not, you have to.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to know if there was anything else that we needed to be looking at or thinking about.
And has the
These-
location worked out for you?
Yes, it's been wonderful. And we did move from the original location back over to kind of by the pond
Yeah.
there. And I think it'll actually be great with the younger kids. We'll stay up closer to the pond area, or if we have children that have more mobility issues. With the older children, we will probably branch down a little further down that hill there, where they have a little more free reign to move around in that area. So,
I have just a couple of questions about some of the specifics in your marketing blurbs.
yes.
Just thinking about trying to do a little more due diligence about what might be going on, you know, in the town, on the town-owned land. Sounds wonderful, all of the programs you've got outlined here. I'm just thinking so about the storybook one. It says, talks about creating a life-size circus. And then there's another one where it talks about creating an elaborate Ghostbusters headquarters. And another one where it says creating their own life-size vehicles and create elaborate track systems throughout the woods. So I just want to ask you to describe that a little more, and also how permanent they are, or how much you're using materials from the forest, and sort of
Right.
what impact that will have.
So nothing that we do is ever permanent. Now, when we do run like a 5-day camp during the summer, like a Monday through Friday, there are times if we are building things that the children are working on and they really want to see it through to Friday. So those would stay up Monday through Friday, but then they would be completely cleared out at the end of that. We don't damage any of the trees or the nature. That is a big part of our mission, is teaching the children to appreciate nature in the woods and being outdoors. I don't have all the distinct details. That is the curriculum that is written from headquarters, and they gave that to us as a teaser of what's coming. And we don't even ourselves yet we should have it by the end of January, but we don't even have all the details. But
Just for instance, we had our nightly program we were creating bowling alleys. And all that entailed was we had some gutters and some PVC pipes and some boxes. And most of that construction was using duct tape and boxes. And actually, the goal is for all these parts to be loose part. Because what happens is there's supposed to be a transformation. And it's supposed to be, imaginative play. So those bowling alleys actually became robot gear by the end of the evening. And so the goal really, especially for us, for the setup and pickup, to be kind of malleable and sort of easy to break down.
Okay. And there's one other piece in here about, designing their own art pieces, creating art exhibits, and selling the merchandise at the end of the week to paying customers. Is that something you're thinking will happen there?
Well, I think what they mean, and again, we don't have the details on the programming yet,
Okay.
but keeping in line with what Timbernooke has done in the past, it's usually like selling to the parents. So they would be creating different
Okay.
art pieces throughout the week. And then on Friday, I'm guessing there's gonna be an art show where the parents come, or they might even buy themselves. And we do a lot of currency. So, like leaves can become currency, little wood chip cookies can become currency, and then the kids will buy and sell from each other. So
I
that's
see.
the type of
Okay.
thing that we're
Yeah.
looking at.
Okay. Great, that's helpful.
Imagine a commercial enterprise.
Yeah, no, it's not, no.
Right.
Again, it all comes back to imagination. We're trying to get
Yeah.
the kids away from, actual money and actual things, and using their imagination. And
Yeah. I think it might be helpful for us as a board just to have once you get the more defined, or you know what you're actually planning to do, for each of these sessions, I think it would make sense to give us a copy
I
of
would be
that.
happy to do that.
Yeah.
Happy to do that. And we also have each site has a lot of individual freedom to work within the guidelines of the curriculum, because we have places in Florida, so they don't have snow. We have places in New Zealand and Australia and in England, and so you do also have a lot of leeway to make it so it's perfect for your site.
Yeah, it
Is there
sounds
any way you
great.
can move the cutoff age from 12 to 80?
Well, I have some ideas for that, actually. I gotta get it kicked off really nicely.
Yeah. And I see we've got a suggested motion here. I'm just wondering if we want to, it describes the dates that you've given us, but I also noticed that you said something about a staff training week, possibly June 22nd to 26th?
Yes.
So I'm wondering if we should include that in the motion.
Well, this is a period, though.
That's what I mean, we'd have to add,
June 22nd would be inside of that.
no, because that's July.
Oh, this is
7/6.
July, duh.
Yeah.
You're right. Oh, so make it
just
from
change it to
July,
22nd.
just change it from July 6th to June 22nd. 6/22. Okay,
You ready for a
good
motion?
catch, yes.
I move that the Board of Selectmen authorize the use of the Conant property for 5 weeks during the summer. Actually, it's gonna be more than 5 weeks
Yeah.
now. It's gonna be like 8 weeks.
Yeah, or 7 weeks.
For the Timberdook Sensory Nature Programs, beginning 6/22/19 and ending on 8/7/2019, subject to a certificate of general liability, showing proper insurance coverage and naming the town of Carlisle as an additional insured.
Yes, we certainly
2020,
do.
you're absolutely right.
Thank you very much.
Maybe you shouldn't include the 80-year-old.
I don't know, I think she might resemble that incineration.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing the program here. I think
Yeah.
it's
Well, you're
really-
more than welcome, and we want to say thank you to the board and to the town for sharing your beautiful woods with us and for all the children.
It's our pleasure, really.
Good. Thank you.
7:45 is the public hearing, so I'm going to wait. Do you want to just go ahead and do the policy? Or do you?
Sure, no,
Yeah,
whatever you
let's
want.
do the policy, because I
Yeah.
think we can knock that right out.
Yep.
That's number 6. We have 2 policies. Policy number 14, payroll procedures. Tim, is that what is currently happening? This policy that was written in 78? Do the heads of fire, police, and public works departments and other departments of the town employing non-school personnel to provide a record of time worked cards to us, to you in specific?
Yes,
They do?
yes.
Okay, so
Everyone
this
does
is
a
still,
bi-weekly timesheet.
this is still current?
It is, I mean, it probably could be,
Maybe the
typeface
language.
looks a little old, maybe.
Yeah, well, I know, yeah.
But it is still,
It still
Okay.
happens.
And
Still occurs.
each time card is signed by both the employee and the department head,
yes.
and procedures become, okay, well, I think we just need a motion to
Maintain it.
reaffirm.
Reaffirm, I think would be.
I move that the Board of Selectmen reaffirm the policy on payroll procedures that was originally established on June 7th, 1978.
Second?
Any further
That was
discussion?
1.
Sorry?
That was 1 year old.
You were one.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
I keep on telling you, I'm old enough to be your mother.
Well, technically, I was closer to 1.5. Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great, another policy down.
Okay.
Then the next policy is the one about inventory. Approved the establishment of a fixed asset inventory for the town of Carlisle on the recommendation of Thomas P. Crane Auditor. And from what I understand, we do have this this inventory, but it is now mandated by the state, and so this
Yeah.
policy is no longer.
It's a federal requirement now.
Or is a
Federal,
federal
okay.
requirement.
The town doesn't really need to have a
So
policy
we don't
because
need this
Yeah.
policy
we do
anymore.
maintain a fixed asset inventory, but it's a federal
Okay.
requirement. It's part of the audit annually.
So, I'd like to have a motion to delete this.
I move that the Board of Selectmen delete the Carlisle Town Policy on Inventory from November 7th, 1979.
Yeah, that's policy
Second.
number 15, okay. There's a motion moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I'll bring another couple next time.
Right.
Town administrators a report. Might as well
Sure,
start on
happy
that.
to start on that. The first item in my report is for the board to declare the warrant open for the annual town meeting, which will be held on Monday, April 27th, 2020, with the town election the following Tuesday. As the goal is you would open the warrant this evening, it would be closed at the second meeting in January, kind of an earlier cutoff than in previous years. We already have kind of early indicators from departments as to what articles they'll be proposing, but we talked about a firm deadline at the end of January. So by
Yeah.
opening the warrant tonight, we can do that by the end of January, and then you'll know, the finance committee will know what the universe of articles, especially financial articles, will be.
Right.
So if you'd vote that motion, that would be appreciated.
I move that the warrant be open for the submission of articles for the 2020 annual town meeting, which should be held on Monday, April 27th, 2020.
Second?
Any further discussion? Luke? Nothing? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. And also attached to my report, you may have seen this from the planning board or other boards, but we have the 2019 subsidized housing inventory from DHCD. I don't think really any changes from the 2017.
Okay, that was one of my questions.
Is that correct, Barney? Is it
Correct.
So no change
I
from
wish we
previous
had,
words.
but no, there's no
3.39%
change.
is the,
Well, at least we didn't lose any, because there was the two at the Stony Brook that we're worried about, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, they're still counting too at Stony Brook, at Rocky Point, but,
At Rocky Point, sorry, Matt.
but
Yes.
really, one of them is not occupied. That's the one that we're working on,
Yeah.
getting a lottery set up to fill.
Okay, but we
But-
could, the problem,
Yeah,
The
it
thing
is
is that we
still,
could
yes, it's still an
lose
affordable
it if we
unit. Right.
didn't get this set
Right.
up.
My one question about this report, for the inventory from them, is that if you look at the Carlisle Village Court line, right at the top, the
Yeah.
first line, it says affordability expires 2017. So what does that mean? Does anybody know?
Well,
Or should- do
the
I
way
need to-
the law used to read, it was never in perpetuity to begin with. It was only like 15 years and then renewable or whatever.
Mhm.
And the thing is that since these are rental, it doesn't matter whether they're affordable or not at this point, I think, for the SHI.
Because it's funded by HUD, so I'm assuming it still
Yeah.
has to be HUD eligible, but
Yeah,
yes.
I want to say we hired, I forget what the name of the attorney was, because this whole thing came out where we could have actually used town council, but we paid somebody to deal with the paperwork surrounding Village Court. I can look back into it, or look back into it. I'll look into it, because I was actually on the stuff at that time, right? But yeah, we hired an attorney, something specifically for Village Court, because, yeah, paperwork needed to be updated. But yeah, I can figure out if that had to do with this.
Okay.
Yeah,
How long ago was that?
I think it was right around 2017.
Okay.
yeah, probably. I was
'cause-
gonna say,
'cause
probably
were you on the,
17.
I
wasn't here
don't think
yet.
anybody was on the board
No.
yet. I think it was pretty much
I would've-
right when I came in. And it was projecting for the next year. I wish I could remember the attorney's name.
O'Donnell.
Oh, yeah, that's it,
Kathleen
Kathleen O'Donnell.
O'Donnell.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the one. Yep, yeah. See, Tim remembers. Yeah, so well, you might have even been at that meeting, but I'll look into it, because, yeah, I know it was something that we could have actually had town council do, but Elizabeth had suggested we use Kathleen because we'd used her in the past. So, yeah, I'll go back on my emails.
And I got a copy of this too, and it just, on the last page of their letter, item 6, it says, if you have no changes, please confirm your inventory is correct by writing no changes and return the inventory page. So who would do that?
That's a good question.
Well, I could do it on behalf of the board.
Okay.
I think in the past it was the
Yeah,
housing.
I didn't know if it,
Yeah,
if-
would you coordinate though, I think with the chair of the trust, I think
Yep.
still is the better way
Okay.
to go. 'Cause
okay.
I don't think the board has
Because I
any-
know Gretchen had gotten this, right? This originally came to
The planning board got it, yeah, simultaneously.
board, so
Yeah, I think it goes
I
out
didn't know
to,
if they were thinking they were gonna send it back in, but,
I'll check with them, but I think
Okay.
we can certainly do that.
okay, great.
Okay.
The next item in my report, the town has been awarded a Maya Safety Grant in the amount of approximately $7,000 for the DPW to purchase a trench box for use at the Green Cemetery. And that obviously will make excavations much safer. It's kind of
Okay,
maybe
what,
a
you
more
gotta
than-
tell us
So many people
more
are
what
going,
a
but,
trench box
or
is.
mundane.
yeah, it's those metal sides, right?
Yeah.
So it prevents
An
the,
excavation.
keeps
yeah.
them-
Oh, from
Cave in,
falling in.
collapsing in.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah,
Yeah.
Hopefully
okay,
nobody's going into the hole, right?
Well, no, but
Not
still,
before their time, no.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Before the time is right. Okay.
And,
That's very good news.
yeah, that's good news. And also, Chair had asked
$1,500 to get it.
for a note on this. Number of boards, committees, individuals are receiving questionnaires from the master plan.
Yeah, I was
Committee?
wondering if we shouldn't be doing this as a board. I don't-
Yes,
I think it's
that
kind
was
of
my
odd to
question.
be doing it as, because I got this, obviously, at
Mhm.
home, and I thought we really should be doing it as a board, but we can't, I don't see how we can do that
By
by
December,
December 20th.
unless people sent you individually. I mean, we didn't really do
What's,
goals for this year, did we? We never,
Well, we didn't finish them, we started them and we
Yeah.
didn't finish them.
is Civic Moxie scheduling, have they talked with you about scheduling an interview with the board?
No,
They're
Because the
doing
board is
on the
a
on the
series of
list.
meetings with town officials and
yeah,
decision makers, I think at the middle part of January.
okay, well, maybe that's when we just put our,
But if
Yeah,
you wanted to send comments to me, then I could compile them. That would avoid an open meeting law issue.
right, that's how it would have to be.
Then-
Um,
If you wanted to do that.
do we want to do that, or just wait until we have this interview with Civic Moxie?
Personally, I'd rather have an open discussion of it, rather than us giving,
Or wait for the-
individual remarks.
Right,
So unfortunately, we will not be participating in this because they didn't give us enough time to get it on the agenda and have a discussion about it, which I think is the way it should have been handled.
Okay.
maybe then, though, we should, somebody, maybe Tim, you would do this for the board, is to reply to Civic Moxie and say that we are assuming that we would like to have a discussion with
Offer
them as a,
comments
as
as
a
part of the-
board,
Yeah,
to have a
the public
discussion about this.
discussion.
I suppose we
session.
could put it on January 14th. Do we have, because we're having, that's starting to fill up.
We could, I
Or
don't know
maybe the end of
date
January, as I remember is anybody here from the planning board? I mean, from the master plan besides me?
No.
No. As I recall from the schedule, I think they're doing the gathering of information, input from people through the end of January.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And the meetings would be, I think it's about mid-month,
Oh,
the
they are doing
14th
it
or the
through the end of
16th. or
yeah,
something.
so
Yeah.
this
Oh,
was
so-
to try to just reach more people than they might be able
Okay,
to
well,
interview, or to
All right,
get some
then I
things
don't
in
feel so
writing.
badly.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think we just need to
Okay,
let them know
I'll
that we're
let
not
them
do-
know that you
we
intend
cannot do
to
this
make comments,
as a
but
body before, end of
by the
January.
20th, but
And
We will.
we definitely want to have some input, but we
Yeah.
want to have it as a body, not as individuals.
okay. I'll let them know.
Well, we may have individual input, but then we should not be speaking for the board as an
Correct,
individual,
right.
which is,
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
okay.
All right, then the next item, in appointing the open space and Recreation Plan Committee. We
we
failed to
messed up.
specify a term for the committee, so.
It's indefinite.
Whenever.
In perpetuity.
Exactly.
So if we could, if the board could revote that, and the expiration date should be June 30, 2022.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint the following individuals: David Friedman, 301 Hutchins Road; Debbie Geltner, 80 Cranberry Lane; Steve Hinton, 684 East Street; Rhonda Michaud, 50 Hart Farm Road; Amy Smack, 114 Red Pine Drive; Sally Zelinski, 384 Acton Street; and Mary Zoll, 225 School Street, to serve on the 2020 Carlisle Open Space and Recreational Plan Committee for a term to expire June 20th, 2022.
Second.
Should be the 2022 Carlisle Open.
Yeah,
Space.
we'll just
But
leave
anyway,
that out,
never
yeah.
mind, Any further discussion? No smart remarks.
Where's Nathan?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. So we'll be meeting December 24th.
It will not be meeting.
No meeting.
Sorry,
No
we're
meeting.
not- we're not be
You
me-
can come.
meeting on December
Somebody else will
24th.
be here.
Right, what was on the list? Yes, no meeting.
And then the 2 January meetings there, we're gonna
Yeah.
add, actually, we talked about, maybe Barney, do you wanna
The transfer station on the 14th.
give a preview of
So,
what we're thinking about?
yeah, well, this can be our liaison report. So following up the conversation we had here 2 weeks ago, the working group met just the other day, and we took to heart the suggestion that we should have some opportunity for people in town to provide input into any proposals around changing the swap shed or even other issues with the transfer station. So we thought, why not do that at a Board of Selectmen meeting? And I don't know what the right format is, but so that it could be more, what's the right term for
I
a
would
part
say it
on
would
the
be a
agenda
hearing.
that could be a,
It's a hearing.
okay.
Because basically
Because we
that's.
want to have some back and
Normally,
forth.
we do not have public input
Right.
during our meetings, but if we're having a hearing,
Yeah.
then we are inviting public input, so it would be a
Okay.
hearing.
So if we could schedule a portion of that meeting as a hearing.
Or- Yeah,
And Gary Davis said he would be here, our DPW chief, and so it'd be nice if we could do it earlier on the agenda rather than later,
okay. No, makes sense.
yeah.
Okay.
So transfer station, presentations about the Gleason Library strategic plan, warrant article requests.
Right, we talked about scheduling some of those for January,
And we talked about Board of Health.
so we can
having
get them
at
in.
some point.
Yes. yeah,
Right.
Exactly.
So we said 14th for Board of Health.
Okay. Let me
I
just make
recall.
that. No, I think you're right. Move that up.
And on the 28th, more presentations about
Right,
warning-
right.
warrant articles.
Now, hopefully, we'll close the warrant at the end of that meeting, having heard from everybody that's proposing.
Anyway, we may
Something.
hear, yeah.
And but we show Board of Health requests on the 28th.
I just
know.
made a note that we're gonna move that up to the
We are, okay,
14th. I have that on the
got it,
28th.
okay.
All right, and that concludes my report.
Excellent.
What we got here? Oh, it's almost, no,
Eight
couple
minutes.
Yeah, no,
Are there any
Minutes.
other liaison reports we could do?
well, let's do the minutes.
Okay.
Alan and I sent in some edits. I don't know if anybody else had any,
They were all pretty much
They were all
editorial.
pretty-
Yeah.
ditzy is what I would say. I wouldn't say they were editorial, I think they were all ditzy. They were commas and colons and Ds instead of Ps or whatever.
I had one sort of substantive comment on page 4 of the minutes. Up at the top, it was, so the kind of update that I put, had written up that we all received, is included in its entirety in the minutes, which is fine. But because when this gets posted, I think it might be confusing to folks that read it, because it says number 3, the change is scheduled to take effect the week of January 6th. Well, we're not gonna do that because we wanna have this open
Yeah.
hearing, and so I don't know what's the right
I see.
way to, I mean, we could just change it
Say
to,
It's proposed
It's
to take
proposed.
place.
the change is proposed to take effect, and then it changes, that's not a problem, because it was only proposed.
Okay.
There can be many a slip between cup and
Okay.
lip, so we'll
Okay.
just put proposed instead of scheduled there,
Okay.
unless you'd rather.
And then, no, and then it said, the next line said, it was agreed by the board that a public information session should be held prior to, I guess you wanted in
I
there,
already
to
said it,
implementing. Did you have
That's
that
already
in
been,
there?
that's
Okay.
already been amended. yeah.
Okay, cool.
Prior to implementing.
All righty, great.
Yeah.
I move the
how
minutes
come-
of
yeah.
November 26th be accepted as amended.
Second.
But,
Yes.
sorry, no, it's just so, we had the discussion that it would take place that week, right? But then we
Yes.
discussed afterwards that we should have so we did actually say that.
Yeah, but it's clearer if you just say.
No, I know,
proposed,
but shouldn't we just put in something else afterwards that, maybe just saying further discussion?
Based on further discussion
Yeah.
at the meeting, right, because I don't want,
Right, because
Okay, so
we
is it-
did say it, right?
Yeah.
And then we
yeah,
talked about it more, and then we changed it, right? So,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't, so that, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I think we should add something that says, I don't know, just something along the lines of, so it was agreed upon by the board that information, so,
Okay, so
after,
yeah.
after discussion, the board agreed that, what was the wording you used before?
a public information session should
Yeah.
be held.
It should be held, right, but prior to
Yeah.
implementing the new plan,
This-
so the board decided to postpone the
So
swap shed
so the
change, or?
proposed changes would take effect later? or
Yeah, exactly,
something?
just something like that, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, my brain's not working, but,
Yeah, so the
But yeah,
proposed
just-
changes will take effect later.
exactly, yeah, because we did say that, right?
Yes,
So-
Yes,
absolutely.
we did.
Yeah, so we can't really change what we said, we
Well, in
just,
fact, it says
just
here,
amend-
it was agreed by the board that a public information session would be held prior to implementing the new plan.
exactly, but this is the actual order that it came in. Sorry to be
Right.
nitpicky, but this is the
Yes,
actual order
yeah,
that
it
so we
is.
changed our mind. So
Yes.
It doesn't mean we should change what we said before, we should just state that we changed our mind.
Well, you've mixed up two things. You mixed up what the report of the committee was
Yeah.
with the board activities, the board
Because
action.
this was the report from the working group,
Right.
up through
That got-
number
that got
3.
inserted into the report.
Oh, I got you.
You see, so,
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if that's why,
Oh,
see, so starting at the beginning of the page in front of it, number 3, where it says swap shed, all of that text up through the top
oh,
of
so that's
page
part
4,
of that.
part of the
right. Oh,
report,
okay.
so,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So, okay, so, but maybe we still have to make it more clear
yeah,
that number 3 was part of the report.
right.
After receiving this report, it was agreed that,
Yeah, that's probably a good way to say it.
maybe say after receiving, after reviewing this report,
it was decided that we shouldn't implement this so quickly.
Until-
Or needed to have the
Or
public
just-
information session.
Right, or just, it was agreed by the board that, public information session should be held prior to implementing number 3 of the new plan.
Yes,
Well, we're
that's
even
good.
the whole, we haven't.
well, it's
implemented-
really,
But it's really all
reviewing
of
the
it.
whole plan.
yes,
Yeah.
it's all the
And
previous
prior
stuff.
to implementing the
Yeah.
plan.
Prior to implementing the new
So,
plan.
so then let's just be clear then. So, the January 6th date will not be publicized,
Right, yeah, 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 there you go.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's part of that, right? And then-
yeah, so
Okay,
what
so
we're
all
talking
we
about
need
now
is-
is early
Uh,
February.
Good, good.
So that's all we need to put at the end of that sentence.
Yes,
And
yeah,
after all
no,
this
exactly,
discussion.
right, no, that,
Okay, so we have 3.
okay.
We have the next sentence, which stands, and then we just put it was decided the January 6th date will not be publicized
Right,
as a result of this discussion.
Yeah,
It will not
there
be
you go.
discussed.
Yeah,
right, okay,
Okay,
does that make sense, Jen?
okay,
Okay.
sorry.
sorry. No, I should be the one saying sorry,
No, no.
but you know what I mean? It's
No,
just one of the-
absolutely.
yeah,
Yes,
okay.
yeah,
All right, we have a motion made and seconded and a discussion. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Yeah, 7:45. We have a public hearing. Get back to the right section.
Legal notice should be in there.
It's in there, it's in there. I'm just not in it. Great. All right. We are are having a public hearing on a joint pole location at Church Street and Carlisle School. And I will read the legal notice that was posted in the Carlisle Mosquito on December 6th. The Town of Carlisle Board of Selectmen have scheduled a hearing on Tuesday, December 10th at 7:45 PM at the Town Hall, Clark Room, located at 66 Westford Street, Carlisle, Mass., on the joint petition of Verizon New England, Inc., and Eversource Energy and Star Electrical request to locate a pole, wires, cables, and fixtures, including the necessary anchors, guys, and other such sustaining and protecting fixtures to be owned and used in common by the petitioners along and across the following public way. Church Street, although it says Church Street here. Install one pole at the corner of Church Street and the entrance to the Carlisle Public School. So, our public hearing is now open.
Okay. Do we
So
want to
do we have any petitioners here, like John DeCock or anybody
maybe
else?
Jonathan, you could kick it off for us, and then we've got someone here from
And
Eversource.
Eversource or anybody else? Okay, so come forward. Okay.
We've only ever met by email.
Oh. Okay,
You wanna-
no, you have to come.
You got it, we
have to
need you at
come
the mic,
closer
or else
up
pull
to
a
the-
chair up.
Bring- no, let me get
Here,
the
why
little
don't I
chairs.
take, and then, why don't you take that one?
Use some microphones.
All right, so for the record, Jonathan DeCock, 130 Oak Knoll Road, representing the Energy Task Force. So,
And,
Steve Conti, representing the Eversource.
great. Okay, would you just describe briefly the project that we are hearing about?
Sure. This is an electric vehicle charging station infrastructure program that Eversource, which is being funded by the state of Massachusetts DPU, to install public charging station infrastructure in our service territory around the state, and for applicants who are qualify under our program. The town applied in September, and we are now working through the design phases and getting ready to hopefully begin construction sometime soon, and to bring service across the street to the parking lot at the school. We'll need to go across Church Street and to set a new pole.
Okay. Will, I had understood that we were going to have this underground. Will this be done underground at a later date, or is it a permanent installation this way?
This will be permanent across the street, and then from, once we install that new pole, we'll go underground to the charging station infrastructure itself.
And was that always the plan?
that was not always the plan. The reason it changed was because we were trying to get this done in time to use our Green Communities grant. And that means we need to do it in the winter, and going underneath Church Street in the winter would obviously annoy the plows, if nobody else. So it's not, very good to patch. So Eversource came up with an alternative, which is we can run an overhead line across the street and then go underground from there. So we will still have to patch the school parking lot, but that's not as big a deal because we know we're repaving that, we can do a temporary patch.
And are there already telephone poles down that street?
There are.
There are, it's not already
Just
underground.
Opposite side of the street.
Got it,
yeah.
okay. Anybody have questions? You look like you have one.
Yeah, I don't like I don't like it being a permanent thing across
Yeah,
the
well,
street.
I mean-
Why can't we just repatch it in the spring? Why can't we do it, patch it? I mean, they pull up enough stuff throughout the winter anyway, right? And just repatch it in the spring? I mean, I know it'll cost the town something, right? So it will be part of the green community, but what, as opposed to having a wire across the street.
I think we were just doing it for the sake of time, just to get the installation complete sooner than later so that we can use the Green Communities funding that I was made aware there's a deadline for. And we're hoping to get an extension on that, but we'd like to get the installation complete
Okay, so
this
you couldn't
winter.
do the installation if it goes underground, is basically what you're saying. There isn't
Right.
time to
Wait
do
till the
it.
Yeah.
springtime.
Right, so it really has nothing to do with it being winter, just there isn't time.
Well, no, it
Well, it
does have
is.
to do with it being winter. So I don't know if our community has this, but most communities have a drop dead date of about December 15th of no more opening public ways because you can't patch them properly.
Nope.
So we don't
I
have
think we
that.
do.
Maybe it's one that maybe it's one of the policies
We
we
should
should be
consider.
having.
Yeah, no,
All
I-
these other
yeah,
lousy
right,
policies
but-
that we don't need.
But, I see us kicking ourselves in the butt
This is why I was asking
down
about.
the road for this, no
Yeah.
pun intended, because it's just, you don't want, I mean, we're trying to get rid of wires up, right? And now we're saying, hey, let's put one up.
I
You know what I mean?
completely agree.
Yeah, no, I know, so is there, but,
Couldn't you go back and do it underground at a later date?
yeah, but
Well,
then how much
so,
of that?
yes, but who would pay for that?
Yeah.
Right, and so once
They
EV
would.
Make Ready has put their wire in.
Right,
And
it's
is-
done,
And the
yeah.
station is done, they have no incentive to come back and
Yeah.
put it underground.
Hmm.
And so just so
Okay.
you guys understand the timeframe requirements, right? So our Green Communities grant officially expires in May of 2020. However, we are as a community not allowed to apply for grants
Until we spent that.
as of essentially sometime early in February, they haven't set the date yet, but approximately February 1st, if the project is not complete. So we need to get this approved, get everything done by February 1st, which is extremely difficult, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
from the time frame to begin with. But if we don't make it in time, then the town loses our eligibility to apply for any Green Communities grants for next year. So we're struggling to try to make that date, even though it's like nearly impossible. So the Energy Task Force has said the right thing to do is essentially treat this like the bird in the hand. We have this one all set. Let's push this one through rather than continue to delay and guaranteed not make it to try for additional money. So we're basically trying as best we can to
Yeah.
get it done in the time required, even though, neither utilities nor town governments move at a very high rate of speed. So,
Well, what's the best guess, I guess, or the likelihood that it will be able to be completed in order to meet the time frame you're describing? Because it would be a shame to go ahead and authorize doing the wire above ground and then not have it be complete, even having gone that route.
right.
I mean, do you have any sense of, are we talking about 50/50? Are we talking about 80?
Slim chance we could get it finished by the end of January, the whole project and chargers in the ground and everything. But I think that with our Eversource relationship with Green Communities, and if we present to them kind of our plan and how everything is all lined up, the infrastructure, the construction started, we have the charging stations purchased through this funding, then we're hoping that they'll just accept that.
So then why don't we just put it underground? Like, I don't understand what the,
Well, yeah, so I
Like,
guess the choices that fall before us, right, are you guys don't have another meeting until January.
Uh-huh.
So if we don't approve this, then either the project is dead, or we agree that we're not gonna try for grants in 2020 because we can't get it approved January 14th, and then have it done by February 1st. There's like no chance of that, right? So if we don't approve it tonight, then either the project's dead, or we go ahead and forego any possibility of grants in 2020 and go ahead and, ask them to come back for, what is it, a roadway opening permit?
Yep.
In January. So those are the three possibilities.
well, I mean, we've had meetings before, in the middle of the day, right, for one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly, I think we're making a mistake if we rush it, I mean, the right way to do it is to do it underground, plain and simple,
So, but did I hear you say either way, that you could do it underground now?
Well, I was under the impression that there was a moratorium on street opening just in the wintertime, but
No,
Yeah.
but not in this town.
Yeah.
So would it take longer to do it if you were going underground versus the overground?
I think if it were, middle of summer, going underground would still take longer, just because we'd have to get a grant of location to cut through that public way, and that's usually takes up some time.
And who does that here? That's a,
You guys.
That's a hearing.
That's us. But that's
us.
what we're saying we would do in the morning.
right.
8 o'clock
We
in the
could
morning,
just
we'll come
meet,
here
yeah.
and do it.
Right.
Oh.
You probably wouldn't even have to show up.
Well,
Yeah.
well, it depends. I mean, so I guess you guys had previously asked for other underground work that the companies supply a bond that makes sure that they're gonna, complete the
Right,
roadway.
right.
So they would need to, get all that worked out.
Well,
You
this
guys
one's
would
going-
also need to have them explain to you what they're gonna much traffic on Church Street while it's opened up, because it's a narrow road. I don't think you're gonna get traffic to go around it on the road, which means it's gonna have to go through the school parking lot. Right, so, there's more logistical.
Or you detour the street, I mean, it's a
Yeah,
one-way
you
street,
could detour the
right?
street completely, but
And-
then we do have to get it done by May, or we lose the grant money completely, and then, you know, if we've signed everything up, then the town's on the hook for about 10 grand, right?
Right, but he also said that they have a relationship with Green
No, that's-
Communities, and,
There's no way that their green communities will, I mean, we could go and ask for another extension, I suppose, but that would be our second extension.
but
Oh.
if we gotta get one okay, so now I'm thoroughly confused. I mean, he just said that it's not gonna be completed. It's very unlikely that going overhead it would be completed, and they would ask for an extension.
No, if we don't get it done by January 31st, essentially, then if we continue to go forward with the project, we lose the ability to apply for 2020 grants. That's what the
Okay, but
actual 10
Steve,
grand
Stephen?
disappears.
But Stephen just said he didn't think it would be done by.
Right, so,
Even over,
even overhead. I mean, there's a slim
Right.
chance.
Yeah, but.
So, yeah, so I'm
Okay, yeah,
confused too, so
yeah,
why,
yeah, this is-
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so what,
what I'm
okay,
hearing is it's likely we're not gonna be able to apply for a grant
right,
anyway.
yeah,
So,
So why not wait and put it underground
exactly.
where it ought to be?
right.
okay, we can do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be difficult here.
Yeah,
it's just
we
I-
really are, we're very sympathetic to this
Yeah,
Yeah.
whole program.
right.
It's just that we feel that the town would be even more sympathetic and more in support if we don't, you know, screw it up.
Yeah.
well, and do what's the best,
And if we can-
putting it underground is a better approach than
Yeah.
above ground,
Right, so,
right?
yeah, then we'd have to send them back to adjust the plans, get you new plans.
Well, this isn't
schedule a
really much of
public
a
hearing.
plan. I mean, it's, I mean, you could just say, you take out the thing that says pole and just say that's how it's gonna go underground. I mean, it's, you know, this, you
Can
know.
I just redline that for you?
Yeah, well, basically, I mean, you know.
Line.
That's all you
It's
need.
like, yeah, where's my
No, we
Crayola,
really
you
are
know?
not trying to be difficult.
No, I
But,
just, yeah.
if you were to tell us that there was you know, no problem, we will have this done and finished by May, and, you know, and the only way we can do it is to have I think we would be more sympathetic to that, but if there's if there's a huge chance that even with that poll, we're not gonna get it done, we're wondering, why should we take that risk?
Right.
Yeah.
And I understand, and understanding where you're coming from is frustrating, is all get out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, I mean, we've been working on this since
and-
July.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and,
you know, it's impossible to get things through, right? So.
Well,
You know,
we-
the school committee's been very supportive of that, members here from them too, so.
Well, and I hope you're hearing us say that it wouldn't be difficult, and we'd be happy to
mean,
do it,
if
have
there's
have
anything
a Board
we
of
can do
Selectmen meeting
Right.
to grease-
before the
We
holidays.
can meet
to-
at very short
yeah.
notice.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, the public hearing requires what?
We could advertise it one
You know,
time.
Advertise it, decide
but,
when it is, advertise it a certain number of days in advance in the paper. Advise all the abutters, so it's not that easy
Yeah.
to do.
No.
Yeah, but honestly, if people didn't come, is there anybody here for this? Other than you two? So, I mean, if people didn't come for a thing above, I don't think they'd come for, I mean, yeah, obviously you can't say that, but, you know, with 100% certainty, but I think people would be more willing to say, hey, wait a second. You know, if it's gonna go underground and I never see it and I never have to worry about it, that's one thing. If it's, you know,
But if we put a thing in the paper for hearing next
Right.
week, yeah, you know,
That's,
we
how
can-
much,
we
how
can
many,
make a decision.
right, it could go into the
How
mosquito
many-
tomorrow and,
how many days do you have to give?
Well,
It's,
A week, seven
but nothing's gonna-
days, or
Yeah, but
7 calendar days?
right,
1 week, yeah.
nothing's gonna happen before then anyway.
right.
We happen to have someone closely connected with the mosquito here in the audience. Yeah, so if we wanted to put in a notice about public hearing, we could get that in.
And what would you need from Eversource before then? Anything, or just, would you give them just carte blanche, you know, have a fun time ripping up the road? You know what I'm saying?
Well, we've got a rights group who, once the work order for this new service hits a certain point, which it's still in design, so it honestly hasn't even hit that point yet, which is why they're not here and I am. But they'll typically get in touch with you folks from the town, and they'll go over the right to pave on your property and all of that stuff. So that will happen, and those discussions will happen.
And that doesn't have to
Might
happen
not
before
happen
we take our vote.
in a week's
or
time,
we do
though.
authorization.
If they've got a,
Because we would give
this
the vote, we would give
schematic
the
or
vote
something?
contingent on
Well,
all that
It's really not much different.
paperwork and
Well,
the rights to
yeah.
bonding and all
Process,
this
yeah.
other stuff
Yeah,
being
it's pretty,
taken care
this
of.
is not, we're not going to the moon.
So,
Running a wire under
Right.
the road is no big deal.
Right.
I mean, they've done this before, once or twice.
And in terms of the paving, because it's going across the road rather than down the length of the road, there's a
Right,
lot less paving.
Yeah.
And for a while, if there's a little bit of a divot or a bump,
Right.
I think we can live with that. We might be able to fix that when we do our paving
Yeah, at the school.
At the
right?
school.
Right, you just have them kind
later.
of.
So, I mean, we're not
Right.
too
That
too
was-
worried
Hit
about
that.
that.
Right, this whole
You know,
project was
So if
in order
it
to get
was
it done
published-
before we do
Well, I totally
Yeah,
understand
yeah,
that.
yeah, no,
So-
we definitely
so
want
if
that,
there's,
so,
you know,
right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
if we need to do a little extra.
Does it count when
you
it's
know, another
published
layer or vote or
electronically?
something
Is it
at that point,
Thursday?
we might-
It starts or Friday when it's,
Right.
Okay.
So,
No, I thought this might happen, but the difficulty is there's no way to communicate with you guys as a board without getting on your schedule. Right, and so, when they suggested this, I thought, I need to clear this with you guys and them, but, right.
well, no to us. Maybe we need to have a new, some way that people with timely, really urgent things need to be able to, well, you could have probably told Tim, and he could probably.
oh, we got it advertised, I mean.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Oh, we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
That's right.
For you, yeah. Yeah, we can
Okay,
get that for you,
well.
yeah.
All right,
Well,
so,
and
do
Maybe
you
we
guys
could have,
wanna set a
we
date
could have
for that?
advertised it twice and done both of these. I mean, the hearing could have been advertised in two different ways, or maybe written in a different way, so it wasn't for a poll.
right, it could have been,
If it-
right,
It's a
a
little bit like,
broader
some of these
definition.
warrant articles that we
Yeah.
write.
Yeah.
If it had been a broader hearing, we could have
Yeah.
taken care of it tonight.
Yeah.
Well, they told us they were going overhead and not
I understand what
going
I'm saying
underground.
to
so that's why
everybody
we-
is, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, but if it gets, does it count the electronic publication of the mosquito on Thursday, or is it Friday when it is in hard copy?
I'd say it's the date of publication would be
Yeah,
Friday.
Friday.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so the following Friday would be the 7 days, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'd have to see if,
Well, no, it's,
the
you
week
need
of the
7 days
first.
for the abutter notifications, right? And then you just need one in the mosquito, so it's,
so the abutter notifications would have to go out tomorrow if we wanted to
Tomorrow.
do something at
right,
the end of
so
next
probably
week.
The earliest you could do then would be next week, Wednesday. So,
Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
no,
yeah.
that's not,
no,
next,
no,
no,
I
sorry,
mean,
that's the
you
week
know-
before
Had a
Christmas
while.
Eve. I got another
Yeah.
week.
And,
yeah.
and in fairness to the board, I think we asked the last time, would this go underground, and,
Yeah.
yes,
right, so if
Yes.
the information changed, so that, I think that's why we're
Yeah.
at the point we're at.
Yeah.
It's not, it's, I don't think, nobody opposes this, it's
No.
just, I mean, I think
Right.
we were all under the impression that it was gonna go underground, and, no problem
And
with
we
moving
think, I
forward.
mean, when you look at the picture, look at all those trees, it's, I had, 2 power outages today in my house.
We all do.
Yeah, I mean,
Both
I,
on there.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, we're trying to
Yeah,
not
that's
have.
right.
The 2 hour
we have
outages
Yeah.
combined lasted 9
Oh,
seconds.
you have a power wall. Sorry.
My inverter measures how much time the power's out. The 2 power outages combined were 9 seconds.
I know, but that was enough to screw up my outdoor lights,
Yeah.
because
Ah.
it thinks they're on solid now, because they think I
well,
turned
that's
them
what I'm
off
gonna clarify.
and on
Yeah, thanks.
twice. But anyway.
Okay,
So
Okay.
so what are we saying? We're saying we're gonna try to, have the Board of Selectmen have a hearing on this, before the holidays? Take a
Yeah.
vote before the holidays,
If it can happen.
if it can happen. Okay.
yeah, so,
And we also, well, I think we also, no, okay, taking a step back, are we also saying, though, that, have we just put the kiss of death on this thing, because it now absolutely cannot be done before
no,
May, or?
I think I would like an understanding from the board is, so the Energy Task Force said the right thing to do is to continue with this project if we have to forego this. If the board agrees with that, right, foregoing, attempting for grant, for Green Communities grants, I guess I'd just like to hear you guys say that, right, because it's potentially 250,000 that we might not be able to get
Next year.
so.
Well, how much is
Granted,
this?
we probably won't get that.
But what we're hearing is that we're probably not gonna be able to get it, go for it
Right,
anyway.
no, but I'm
Yeah.
saying, so if we, since it sounds like we're not gonna vote positively on this tonight, the two options that remain are drop the project and attempt to get Green Communities grants for next year, which we'll get somewhere between 0 and 250,000. Or continue forward with this project, foregoing that because they won't be able to get done in time.
Well, how much was this project? It wasn't a lot of money, right?
So the Green Communities grant is $9,424.80. The Eversource portion has not been disclosed to us. They pay for it entirely without every telling.
It's significantly more than that.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. But it is-
My
is-
estimate is over 100,000.
Yeah, but is that gonna change in the foreseeable future? I mean, so if we don't do this now, we apply for a Green Communities grant, we just do it in the spring.
No, that's it.
No.
So
We don't
so
do it in
Green
the
Communities
spring.
grants will not arrive in time for us to do this
Oh, I
before the
gotcha,
parking lot is
gotcha,
paved.
okay.
So if we were to attempt to redo
Yeah,
this.
see, that's the other problem.
Then,
Okay.
so if we go for grants, then there will not be a charger at the school, because we won't wanna go through and rip up the brand new parking lot.
Yeah, no, you
Right.
definitely don't.
And that's where the chargers belong, or at the school for the
Yeah.
teachers.
That's
To-
one of many
to-
places.
Oh,
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
but it's one of the best places in town to encourage employees to drive.
And it's
electric
going in
vehicles.
such a way that we could have more in the future,
Yes,
in
that's
that
what Eversource
location.
does.
Right.
Yeah, which I
Okay.
really like.
I'm a bird in the hand guy. Let's do this project.
Yes, I agree.
It'll make, since we probably aren't gonna be able to apply for a Green Communities grant anyway, because regardless of which way we go, we're not gonna have it done in time. Let's do this.
I agree.
It coordinates well with the school parking lot paving, and it'll go underground.
Yeah.
It'll be
And
done right.
Let's do it, and let's do it right.
Yep.
And we
Okay.
recognize that we will be giving up the possibility of a Green Communities grant next
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
It is unfortunate, we're sorry, but we
No,
think,
that's okay, because as you know, the Energy Task Force is understaffed.
Yes.
And so, having them not manage more projects next year that are Green Communities is also a part of that.
Yeah, it might be a good time to regroup and, try to get,
it's one of those positions that we are not going to fund this year,
Right.
was the grant writing, which would have,
Yeah.
And we need to rebuild the Energy Task Force.
sometimes I still wonder, I still ask myself, it's not false economy on our parts, but
Yeah.
which is something we'll be discussing with FinCom.
Yeah.
well, and part of it too, with Nathan's proposal there with, taking some of that money from some of the projects that have been implemented, maybe, I don't know exactly when that would happen, right? But maybe by next year, there would be some funds to get some support to help write these grants,
Yes.
so, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, need more people.
Okay, so how will you guys decide when you're gonna have a meeting, or shall we just?
We will decide
push it off
when
until the
you
14th?
tell us what you're doing. I think what you've heard from this group is that we're still interested in moving forward to install the infrastructure. And so if you need us to meet before our next meeting in order to give you some, it seems to me the pressure is off if we,
Yeah,
right?
if we just go ahead and say that, then maybe what we should do is just plan for a January 14th hearing. Let's just plan for a January 14th
and
hearing
it's gonna
for
cost the
underground.
town $10K probably?
No, because as long as we spend the Green Communities grant money before May 31st.
Right, you
Oh,
got until
okay.
May now,
And
yeah.
it
Oh,
certainly should
okay.
be done by then.
So, all right,
Yeah.
so yes, okay.
No, well, it's just, does it make sense to have it sooner though, so Eversource can get going? I mean, because we're gonna stall you, right?
We would like to get the process going as
Yeah,
fast as we
exactly,
can, yeah.
exactly,
I
so,
mean, the sooner you hold a hearing and approve, see, I
Right.
can't really spend the Green Communities grant until we've got all the approvals from all the boards.
right.
Okay.
So the school committee meets tomorrow. They've been very supportive, so I'm kind of expecting that they'll support it, So, but then that's the last board meeting would be you guys to
Yeah.
approve
Okay,
this approval.
so, let me put it to you this way. If you feel you need a board meeting before the January 14th, please let Tim know, and he will see what he can do for you to get us together to do that one
Well, do you
item.
think we should try for next week, Wednesday? That's the earliest available opportunity, I think.
Yeah,
work
yeah,
in terms
Wednesday,
of
the
the-
18th, or Friday, the 20th, right? Because we're gonna have to move to postpone or to extend the public hearing until such a date, right, and time. And then we just extend it again if you guys aren't ready, right? But the slot is still,
Yeah, although
But
it's a different
it's a
hearing.
new public hearing,
It's a
right?
new,
Because now it's a
we will close this,
Going,
road opening hearing.
oh, it's a
Yeah.
road
Not
opening
a-
hearing.
yeah.
Yeah, so then, but we can still do that.
I don't have is like how many feet up the road.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, what,
bit more open-ended where it was going.
But that's what,
Wednesday, the
will you
18th.
be able to provide that
Sure.
by
Yeah.
the,
By the 18th
if
or
we
the
were to meet
20th?
next week?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
If it's,
Yeah, because you guys have everything, it's just on a computer, right?
Yeah,
And
it's not,
bang,
I
yeah.
can do that tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause when I wanted gas extended, the guy he was like, oh, no, we could go this way, we could go that way, we could do this, we could do, it was still $40,000. I was like, yeah, no. Let's stick to oil, thanks. Yeah. It's a lot of, you buy a lot of oil for $40,000. So what, the 18th or the 20th? I mean, what?
I'm
but
good,
that-
well,
if we advertise
Does that
for
work for-
Friday, then 7 days, 20th is really the
and is this
earliest you
morning or
could do
meet
it.
or,
So
or
do you hear
evening?
that? The 20th is the earliest we could do it.
Oh, 20th is the earliest we can do it.
Oh, yeah, if it's the Friday, yeah.
Right, so that's, Friday, okay.
Right.
It could be in the morning if that's better.
I could do it at 8 in the morning.
Works for me.
I
whenever.
could do that
Yeah.
too.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay, December
Shoot for
20th,
that.
All right, so we'll put it in,
8 a.m.
Okay.
This is hearing. Clark Room.
okay,
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you could vote to close this hearing, because you're not gonna
Yeah.
grant
okay.
over the road.
You vote no?
Nay!
No, we don't want no polls.
No finding, just, yeah.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, so,
Causing all kinds of trouble tonight, yeah.
You're not even Nathan.
I'm pulling an Nathan, that's what it is, yeah.
so we have another public hearing for the underground storage of propane on
River Road,
River Road. And
fire chief
I
is
will
here.
read the legal notice. The Town of Carlisle Board of Selectmen will conduct a public hearing on Tuesday, December 10th, 2019, at 8 p.m. at the Town Hall, Clark Meeting Room, 66 West First Street, Carlisle, Mass. 01741, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 148, Section 13, regarding the license application submitted by John Power for the installation of underground propane tanks at the property located at 383 River Road, Assessor Parcel ID 1-7-1, described as follows. 3 850-gallon ASME propane tanks with total aggregate quantity of 2,550 gallons of liquefied petroleum gas to be stored. Comments thereon may be submitted in writing to the Board of Selectmen, Town Administrator's Office, 66 Westford Street, Carlisle, Mass. 01741, by noon on Friday, December 6th, 2019, or in person at the hearing. So I declare this hearing open, and Tim, did we get any written comments?
I did not.
Thank you. Is there somebody here to make a presentation? No,
Fire
just the
chief's here
chief.
to speak to it.
Okay.
They've
It's
reviewed the
interesting, this guy is
application.
a fellow Californian owner.
Evidently.
Sherman Oaks,
Sherman
CA.
Oaks. Hey, I lived right by there. It's my stomping grounds. Okay, Ventura Boulevard, can't believe it. Okay, do we have any discussion, any information that we?
I think that the
We
chief
need-
can provide some background. I don't think the applicant is here, but
So, I wrote a note, I think that was attached to it. In speaking to them, so this is a private drive, very, very narrow, winds down in there. If something happened and we laid a line in there, we'd basically block the road with the line that we
is brought in, meaning no more trucks, no more anything. You look over there, they've ripped out the swimming pool, and I talked to them, and they said, oh, yes, 40,000 gallon swimming pool is going in. So my proposal to them, I tried to word it in such a way that I don't want to hold this up. You know, if they want to get this in before they get a swimming pool in, that's one thing. But basically, on renewal, we expect to either have a standpipe going to that swimming pool, so we can use that water if we need to, or a cistern. But so to kind of, the reason I worded it that way was so that there wouldn't be this chicken or egg problem of, oh, they need this for the winter and they don't have the swimming pool yet and that kind of thing. But that basically we expect by the time they're done and people are living in there that we have some kind of a water source down there.
These are on the other side of the road from the river, or are they on the riverside? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so there is not a direct access to the river for our trucks.
Okay, all right, just.
Yeah, right. There is a pond not too far away, but it's a very shallow pond that would be very seasonal.
Yeah,
And so,
yucky and yucky, okay.
So the contractor says that they're 1,000-gallon tanks. On the application, it says they're 850.
Yeah, I noticed
Are
that.
they-
Yes,
so I believe what you're doing, well,
8,500, 850.
anything over 2,000 gallons requires a license. And so you're giving them a license for something over 2,000 gallons.
Yeah, but
But I don't know.
In-ground for
That's-
1,000.
My-
Yeah, so I mean, either way.
So,
you gotta have-
my understanding is that a 1,000-gallon tank holds about 850 gallons.
Oh, okay.
But,
All right.
but they should have written it
As a 1,000.
as a 1,000-gallon tank if they plan to put a
Oh.
1,000-gallon tank in.
Right, yeah.
Well, also, one of us, one's a letter and the other one's is an application, and I think we need
Yeah.
to be going by the application, not by the email.
Yeah, well, is it accurate, though, I guess is the question. I mean,
Right.
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
It's just there's a discrepancy.
In any case, it's over 2,000 gallons, so.
Yeah, so, but what's the reason for the 2,000? Is it a safety thing? Is it a?
Well, 2,000 gallons of propane is a lot of propane.
lot of propane?
Yeah.
And so the way the Mass General law is that you need a license on a property for over 2,000 gallons. A lot of what that has to do with is often a property is used by a bunch of different people.
Yeah, right.
And so what they don't want is, you know, this guy has 750 gallons, this guy has 800 gallons, and nobody gets a license because all of a sudden on this one property, you have all of this
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So they just set something and said, you need to come and get your jurisdiction to allow you to have more than 2,000 gallons. And it's by property, not by user. So like Massport needs to have a license because they have all these different people with
Right.
yeah.
I'm sorry if this is, I should know this, but the propane is just to serve the house? And the
That's a
pool
heck
heater?
of a lot of,
Yeah, it's
It is.
Two of them are for the house, one's for the generator.
It's generator.
Right,
60,000
generator, but,
kilowatt generator.
It is, but it's also a heck of a house.
It
So that's a
is,
piece
okay.
of it.
Yeah.
okay.
But I think people in those kinds of places want the place to run for a
Abundance.
period of time, generator to be able to run without interruption and all that kind of thing. But again, that's not I'm more looking at the safety aspects
Right.
rather than should they want that.
Right.
Often when you have that, it's because you have greenhouses or something like that. Typically, if you have that size. Yeah.
The last one we did was greenhouse.
Greenhouses are,
Yes.
used quite a bit.
And so so the house is way back, the tanks
It-
are off,
it-
and
it-
it's not gonna. it's not
Right,
near
so
enough
the big
water,
thing you're
right?
concerned about is,
Go up an acre.
unlike natural gas, propane goes downhill,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
settles down. And
Yeah.
so, there is a house down the hill. It's done in such a way that there's something of a ravine where the gas probably wouldn't hit it. But it's my understanding they even own that house that's down there as well, so,
That's where they'll put the in-laws.
yeah. But in general, there's a little bit of a ravine between the two houses, even though it goes downhill from their house.
Yeah,
But that would be our big concern is what happens when you have it let loose.
yeah.
As well as I've talked to them about a shut off to the house, so that if you need to shut off to the house, because you're not gonna use up that much it's gonna, if there's a problem in the house, it's gonna go for a long time before
Yeah.
it,
Yeah, okay.
so they're gonna have to shut off on the side of the house.
I guess in general, are you okay with this?
In that situation, that location, yes, there's enough space that,
So if we approve the license, do you suggest that we include,
Two conditions.
Well,
your
the way I
recommendation about
worded
the
it-
standpipe and the,
right, the way I worded it was that that would be required on renewal in 2 years. So these have to be renewed every 2 years to give them a warning that we do expect it to happen. But that, again, I didn't want to word it in such a way that they, until they had the swimming pool in, they couldn't have heat.
I
Yeah,
see.
what if they decided not to put a swimming pool in?
Well, then they would put a cistern in.
Yeah.
Then they'd have to put a cistern. Okay.
And again, I don't know that it needs to be worded that way. I think it was more just serving them notice that
Okay.
they agreed to this and we expect it. But
Okay.
for any of these licenses you do, they're for 2 years, and you can
Okay.
take it away the next 2 years.
And this would be for their own protection, actually.
Absolutely, and that's the reason why they,
well,
Near there.
that's the reason why they agreed to it
Yeah.
so readily. I mean, they know it's a narrow drive that, yeah. And it's a place worth saving.
So,
So do we, are we fine with the wording of this application? Or are you saying, Luke, it may need to be changed to
The
indicate
application's
it's,
no, the application is fine.
application's fine.
Is the,
Well, unless the 850, unless
Oh, I
it's be
see.
worded as a 1,000-gallon tank.
See,
So that's what
that-
we'll approve. We'll approve what's on the application.
but that's the
Well,
application
Yeah, but
has
do we?
3 850 gallon.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's the official.
that's the official
what-
one.
that's
That's
what
what
we
they
would
can
ask
put
for.
in.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so that,
but you're saying it actually is 1,000?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't?
I don't know. What I do know is that the effective capacity of a 1,000-gallon tank is less than that, and it's somewhere around that.
Oh, I see.
And so
Okay.
I'm just
Assuming
guessing
that,
that might have been where the
right,
Yeah, the discrepancy.
difference came in.
discrepancy is. Okay, they're talking about how much actual propane.
But in reality, what we're approving is the greater than 2,000 gallon.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
yeah. So with, so I guess the only thing is, on the motion that we have in front of us here, do we want to add with the condition
Yeah, there are two
that the owner
conditions.
will prepare a written yeah, I
Yes,
think we
that's
want
right.
to
Right.
add that language to the motion. And so it just, it would be the motion plus this,
Okay,
for whomever is
all right,
making the
well,
motion.
I can do that.
Okay?
I move to close the public hearing.
All those in favor? A
Aye.
second? Sorry, we got a second.
Oh.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Now I move to approve the license application submitted by John Power for the installation of underground propane tanks at the property located at 383 River Road, assessor parcel ID 1-7-1, described as follows: 3 850-gallon ASME propane tanks with a total aggregate quantity of 2,550 gallons of liquefied petroleum gas to be stored. And further, that the owner prepares an emergency written plan to be approved by the fire department.
And, okay. Do we want to say that,
Well, that says may.
yeah, the question is, do we also want to add that in 2 years when they come before us, if the pool has not been, well, and
We
it's
can
also
handle that at
conditioned.
renewal.
No, I think it really is conditioned, well, on a pool or cistern being built before renewal, before they come back for us. We don't want to leave them there for 2 years without one or the other.
Right, again, I tried to work on a wording,
I understand.
and it,
So,
you tied yourself to knots, and so I just decided this was the easiest thing, just to warn them that this is,
or maybe
Is
just
that
say, and
tied to
that
the use of the
before,
propane?
yes.
Or is that just standard, something you want to do for fire protection in general for the house?
It would be nice for fire protection, but this is a place where they're adding a hazard, and therefore,
Okay.
so I think it's conditioned on either a pool or a cistern being installed before the end of the year, or not this year, but before the end of next year. Or
Yeah, well, could we
before-
revoke it? So
Just not renew it.
yeah, we just wouldn't renew it, right? I mean, you
Okay.
put a condition
Well,
on,
it's
but if
done.
we can't
Condition on-
revoke it, then we just,
Okay, but then
You-
with that
you-
condition,
anything you grant, you can revoke.
yeah.
It
Is there a fee for this?
My
building?
general, I believe there was.
Oh, good.
That's generally the case in Mass General Law, at least that is for any permits we give, we can revoke them,
Okay.
if you don't.
Well, so that's the thing, do we wanna set a timetable on it, or do we wanna just say,
What would you like as a
We
timetable?
don't know what the construction timetable is.
Right.
no, exactly?
No, that's why I was
So-
giving them a year.
Yeah,
Well, what if we said before renewal?
yeah, exactly,
Okay.
that's what I was thinking,
Before
right? And then we just wouldn't
renewal,
renew it, just give them a heads up that,
Right, the,
you know, you got,
That gives them 2
The-
years.
you got your 2 years.
there
and-
there will be either a standpipe included in the swimming pool or a cistern
Yeah.
in order to renew the license.
Yeah.
They, I don't know that anybody's in a hurry to live there. So
Uh-huh.
there's a piece of it where if somebody was going to be in there immediately, my timetable would be different, but I
Okay.
see no indication of that.
All right.
It's been under construction for a long time, and from what I see, it's going to be under construction for
Yeah.
longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to meet these people. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't have a tank to heat the swimming pool.
Yes. All right, so, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. So we have the first, you did put in the first
Right.
thing. Are you want to put in the second condition or not?
I think that's something you handle at renewal, but,
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
yeah.
So is there a second?
Second? Because I didn't make the motion, right?
I did.
Yeah.
You did, yeah, so I'll second.
Further, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And you've already written to them, they know that they won't get renewal.
I'm not sure I gave those words. I will talk to them.
Yeah, what I could say is, at this point
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
you could say, the Board of Selectmen,
Approved it.
has approved your application, however, they agreed that they will not renew it in 2 years if there is not one of the two things included,
Very good.
okay?
Thank
Yep.
you, Brian.
All right.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank
Words of
you.
one syllable. Well, a couple of minutes late for our budget personnel overview, review of fee structures, and the review of potential warrant articles, but here we are. Who wants to join us?
Come on down.
Kim should definitely. Yeah.
You're taller, too. Got a little more heavy lifting than You're tall.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're outnumbered here, I
That was deliberate.
Can we get higher chairs or something?
That was deliberate.
You already have higher chairs. What are you
That's
talking
right, oh yeah, look at you. Cut your legs a little shorter. It's a chair that sinks.
When we
Yeah.
need it, yeah.
There's one.
the ejector chair.
Ejector
The
chair.
ejector
Boing
chair.
chair.
Well, do you want to start?
Sure. So, so we met last night, and we have been meeting for a number of meetings since last time we got together, which was in September. And as you know, this is the FY21 budget process that we're kind of going through. And we usually kind of kick it off in September. We actually have these sessions with the different committees and departments to essentially gather information around what their needs are in order to kind of fulfill what they think are kind of the priorities. And coming into the end of the year, we typically issue a guidance, of which the first month and a half of next year we'll consider and talk with departments again if there's something that materially changed. If there's nothing to change, it's not an opportunity just to come and and say the same thing again. But if there's something material change, we'll discuss that. We'll finalize that, obviously, before town meeting, put it into the warrant with regards to the letter and such. And I'm highlighting the process because I think there's a number of roles and responsibilities that are in that process. I think from the Board of Selectmen, what we looked to you guys for as we go through this process of developing the guidance is really the priorities and the objectives for the town. And it's in that we can actually go and develop these the guidance and the finalized budget recommendation. And that's our responsibility, to provide that guidance and recommendation to the town. And it is the FinCom's recommendation. Certainly we work very, very closely, and I don't think, I've been on the board for, 2-3 years now. It's not, there's no vast kind of differences between the Board of Selectmen, but ultimately it's the decision of the FinCom to present to the town for approval in that. But in order to do that effectively, I think there's that aspect of really understanding your priorities and objectives, not only this year, but really, coming forward, kind of seeing the dynamics of what's happening in the town and the needs and such. And then the departments, their role is to provide information. In a certain sense, if it is well understood what the priorities of the town are, what they should align their budgets to is to support those priorities in that. And I think that's one of the things that, as we've discussed as a committee, that each year seems that there is some clarity in that, but there could be always better clarity in terms of what those priorities are that would help us to be able to have our discussions around kind of landing that. I think the personnel process, which I think there's some discussions about that you've had, kind of follows that. We put into place, so the Board of Selectmen actually review these, and it doesn't go any further than the Board of Selectmen until you said, hey, this fits within the priorities of the town, of what we think is important. And then it goes to Personnel Board and ultimately to us. So even in that personnel process, it's very similar in that aspect of really needing to know, hey, what's important? And I think as I read, as an example, the letter that David wrote, and I think he wrote it to a number of different people, I think what he was highlighting is like, hey, is this a priority in the town? You have an aging community, they have needs, and I think that's certainly something that you as, the Board of Selectmen need to kind of sort through and discuss. And we want to hear what those priorities are, from that, not only in that particular, I was using it as an example, but just in general, that type of thing. So the last comment I'd make is before we kind of open up some dialogue is, at least one of my objectives as the chair is really to change our annual budgetary conversations from looking at just this present year to really looking a little bit further. And I think that goes back to this aspect of, we can go every year and look at, hey, 0% budgeting or whatever it ends up being, but that's very short term, right? You're looking at trying to deal with an acute issue. What are the kind of longer term issues that we see? The aging population, all these different things that are happening to our town. And what does that mean for us as a town, from the Board of Selectmen in terms of the priorities, objectives that we're trying to accomplish? And I think that's our hope for, this meeting. At least one of our takeaways, or maybe a number of takeaways, would be what are those kind of key things that you've been discussing that in terms of our process, we'll meet one more time next week. We actually have all of the requests and we just kind of laundry list them down. But then knowing those priorities, we'll have that next discussion, and then we'll kind of finalize the recommendation. So we have no recommendation going in because we feel that there are some things that we'd like to hear a bit more about in terms of your priorities before we finalize that. I'll kind of pause there in the rest of the committees. Anything else that you'd like to add? We met last night, kind of thinking through, taking a look at what was put together in terms of in aggregate, and beginning to talk about what are the things that we kind of need to be able to move the ball forward.
I think it's important to remember, so a lot of what we're doing is focused on the operating budget.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk to long-term caps, which is part of that, separate warrant. In addition to that, when we talk about tax burden on our residents, obviously the warrants are a big factor. And so getting an understanding tonight of the scope of the warrants, getting your visibility into what's still up in the air, what's still open would be helpful. We've heard things, and it would be good to get your perspective on that. That's a big financial component. In addition, just the other pieces that make this complicated are, revenue forecasts, growth outside of the tax base, grants. There's all these other factors that come into the tax burden. And I think I want to underscore that we take a conservative approach in forecasting what those are, so local receipts. So typically, I think what we find, and I think this year was no exception, when we present a budget at town meeting, usually the actual tax rate increase is not quite as large as what we thought it might be at town meeting, because we tend to be conservative on forecasting those other financial components that, although we rely on residential property tax, those other components can move things. So just be aware of that as we talk through these. There's a lot of unknowns as we try to make a budget, knowing that we'll vote on it in, is it April or is it May this year?
April.
April.
It's April.
And we don't even finalize the tax rate till the following November, so.
Well, we just finalized this year's.
21. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in
Yep.
fact, what did it end up being?
1836, 7 cents
So
over
7 cents.
last year, over last year, so it was 1829 for 20.
And what
19,
had we,
did we-
sorry, what had we forecast?
We didn't forecast, we don't typically in the town presentation forecast a tax rate, because the tax rate is also dependent on the assessment of all the,
Right.
so it's,
Yeah.
Right, we hadn't forecast
it's
that. Okay.
complicated. So
Yeah.
generally what we do is we focus on the operating
The
budget
budget.
increase
Yep.
and the increase if you take in operating
Warrants,
budget, the
yep.
warrants.
Long-term.
And then we make a general statement about what we think will happen with local receipts, government, grants, circuit breaker. And those are the things that ultimately we have to wait and see.
Local receipts did go up
Yeah.
this year, and we did bump that.
But when we
number
talk
to
about
take away the tax burden.
what their increase in budget is from year to year, we said,
Yeah.
2 point whatever
Yeah.
percent it was. People hear that as, that's what my
The tax
taxes are
rate,
going
that's
up
right.
as. So I guess what my question is, what did we forecast as our budget increase as opposed to what is the actual percent increase of the,
You'd have to look at the individual, I hate to say it, but you have to
Individual
look at the
year.
individual tax bills,
Yeah.
because someone's assessment may have gone up.
well, but
That's right.
17 cents more than something, than.
7 cents.
7 cents.
Yeah.
More than less is what percent of the original rate, is what I'm asking.
Well, 7 cents on $18 would
36,
be
yep.
Yeah.
I don't have my
Um,
calculator, but. yeah.
very small,
Small.
but that doesn't necessarily
It's
map
not
to.
your
very
rate. You're
small,
right.
and
It's
the
not-
Evaluation stayed the same.
I only bring it up to
Right.
say, we're
Right.
talking about a
Right.
component of the
Right,
budget
because the
tonight.
valuations have gone up.
Yep,
So the-
evaluate, yeah.
You're looking at your whole
Right, right,
tax
right.
liability of your 28
Yeah.
million or whatever it is that you're
Yeah.
actually
Which is-
raising.
The rate's only one part
And
of
this
it.
year, we did increase the local receipts, which takes a little bit of a burden off, but
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of like motor vehicle went up and fees and something
Right.
like that. So
But
you
it's,
still
but it's the other
increase it,
thing
but
that makes things
it's
difficult to
difficult.
talk to to
Right, have
people
people
about
understand.
and have everybody really understand what is going, what is happening. But I do know that, the perception is, my taxes have gone up 30% in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not too far off the mark.
Right.
So could we say, is there a way to calculate then the taxes paid by individual homeowners, the total there, and what percentage increase that was over the previous year?
Yeah, well, what we've done in the past is we've taken the average,
You take the average.
average home
Everybody's
value,
different,
the
depending,
average
somebody goes
tax
up
bill.
30, somebody goes up
And I think
50.
we presented that at town meeting,
Yes.
the average tax bill.
Yeah, and so
Yeah,
what
yeah.
were we saying, what did we say last time about what the
I
average
think-
increase was gonna be, and then where did it actually come down?
Pull the, we can follow up on that.
Yeah.
The only point I wanted to
So-
make is,
So I-
we generally,
totally
yeah.
understand your point, but
Yeah.
I'm also saying that we have to be so
Yeah.
careful when we talk about these
Right.
things
Right.
because of the perception in town and
That's
what
right.
people-
Oh, absolutely.
how people feel
Yeah.
about it.
And this is one thing I want to highlight in this, because we get into this conversation, and I think, very often we try to get into a judgment of, what's a reasonable tax increase, right? I think that's what we're
Right.
trying to get at.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
it depends on who you ask, and I think the thing I challenge in there too is, if their requirements or needs, or at least what they see in terms of the town, are being met, they're willing to pay for that.
That's right.
And so that's why I want to get into this aspect and kind of push a conversation away from looking at tax rates into where's the direction for the town going? Because what we develop, or what you're developing in terms of a viewpoint, is not only your own viewpoint, because obviously you're hearing the viewpoints of many, many constituents. And in that, you're kind of formulating, hey, these are the priorities. Our town loves, buying up properties, right? I mean, they like their open space. Maybe I phrase it that way as opposed to opening. They love their open space. That is a priority for the town, right?
Exactly.
They're willing to pay for things like that.
But we also were just notified tonight that the senior population has gone up 60%
Yeah.
in the past 10 years.
That's right.
And the school population has gone down by approximately the same amount over the same period.
Mhm.
So that, I
Yeah.
think, is going to have.
No, the
The
town,
ta-
the
the
school
school hasn't gone
population
down.
hasn't gone down
Well,
60%.
It went down from, went from 800 to 600.
Well, that's that
Okay.
800 was a bubble. I mean, it's stabilized at
Okay.
around 600.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
nevertheless,
the thing
the
is,
general point is.
the general
it is
population has gone
slight-
down.
Right.
Right.
That's
It's
right.
so
not the
we-
same, though.
So aging
Yeah, you have an
population
aging
is going to
population.
become more of a priority.
That's right. Exactly.
So if you're asking about priorities,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that's going to be more of a priority. It has.
That's right. That's right. And I guess what I'm saying with regards to that is, in one instance, one priority there's, I have a fixed income. But if essentially they see that essentially the taxes that they pay into it are actually benefiting them in some way, in a way that's valuable to them, it's not so much of a complaint coming out, right? I think very often what you may hear is like, well, I don't have kids in the school anymore, right? And so then all my taxes are kind of going to, I don't see any benefit. That's where the
That's where the
thing comes in.
conflicts.
And I think that's the proverbial challenge that you have in terms of balancing that, because in some instances, some of the younger families move into town because of the school system. Well, if you
That's
bend
true.
it to, purely to essentially our aging population, then essentially it's kind of a, the story's made, right?
Right.
The younger families aren't gonna move in, and it's just gonna keep getting older, right, in that way. So, I don't envy your position, but I think that's the piece, it's a good dialogue to get an understanding of, based upon where you guys are hearing, what you guys have discussed, what are some of the key aspects of priorities and objectives. I threw a few of these as an example, like in terms of investment. Another example in terms of, increasing my taxes. Would you increase our taxes this year so that you can decrease them next year? That's about efficiency, right? So these are all kind of key things, and, you think about from solving the challenge we have with higher taxes, maybe this year is not, whatever, 0% or a low percent. Maybe you want 3 or 4%, and we focus on efficiency, and the next years you manage it that way,
Well,
right?
it's a little bit what I was talking about when Jonathan DeCock was here. We had looking like we're going to be losing $250,000 of grant funding because we're not able to keep up with our grants. If we had more staff that were
Right.
helping to do that, which would not cost any $250,000.
Yeah.
So yes,
Yeah.
there are times where you do want to spend money to save
Maintenance-
money.
That's right.
Facilities.
That's right.
We have to,
Well-
we have to invest now
Eh,
in facilities
Right.
to avoid catastrophic
Exactly.
right.
repairs
So,
in
I
10
mean,
years, which
and
we've been dealing with.
so, which is keeping me up at night. Because I see all these things
Yep.
looming.
Yep.
And I'm trying to figure out, without raising the taxes astronomically, where else can we find some money to help us out over this hump? Because we have been suffocating the facilities for years and years and years, and so at this point, we can't, it's like Balaam's ass, we can't, it's going to just,
Yeah,
right?
That's right. I know the reference.
Yeah,
so.
thank you.
I'm not sure how many others know the reference, but, yeah.
We can't do that anymore.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And at the same token, it's like, this aspect of other things, like I have here, it's an objective, priority, increase employee retention. Because you can think of it this way, well, we keep it low and then you manage, your expenses that way. But if people keep turning over, there's a big expense to turnover of
Yes,
people.
but-
Right? And, so obviously there's aspects of that. And I think there was one meeting that we had and we said, what it would mean to have like a flat budget. I said, well, there's no COLA, right? In order to get the flat, oh, no, we can't have it. Why? Because you want to make sure that you're managing
But
your
this is
employees,
why
right?
It's important also to have those discussions.
right.
Because it reminds you and everybody why we are doing the things
Yeah.
that we're doing. You don't want to just be doing it year after year after year because you did it last year.
Yeah.
I think it's important at a certain point to step back and say, well, we're doing this
Yeah.
for employee retention, and not only that, but we're gonna have to probably give them more benefits because we're lagging way behind everybody else in the benefits. And
Yeah.
so when the employee who was happy enough with the benefits and is staying but ends up leaving, we won't be able to attract anybody good because they'll say, what? This is it? Forget it, I'm going to the next town over.
Right, right. Yeah, and in a certain sense, I mean, again, this is all I just threw these are examples. I don't know whether you've discussed any of these or not, but in terms of objectives and
We've
priorities,
discussed- Yes.
what are some of the things that have you discussed and thought through for this year and kind of going forward? It's like, hey, these are the areas that we really think that we need to kind of move towards from a town perspective in terms of priority.
Well,
I thought you were gonna
it's
say-
like maybe in the context of, I don't know if we want to start with warrants. Are there
Yeah.
particular warrants that you're more favorable towards than others? Specifically the ones that have price tags associated with them.
Yeah.
Like, I know
Like-
facilities has been
Yep.
an area of focus the last 2 years between the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee.
Yeah.
I think the biggest unknown for us, we know the requests, we're familiar with the department budgets. The warrants are the ones that can really move
Needle.
an
Yeah.
annual budget. You could have one warrant that, $500,000 warrant that, could mean a percentage and a half, depending on how it's
Yeah.
funded. So, and when we make our budget letter, we assume passage of all the warrants.
Mm-hmm.
And we will do that. But from a planning standpoint, like, where do you fall on those things? I know we've gotten reports of the personnel decisions, or
Yeah.
the discussions that have been had to date.
Yeah.
Those are important inputs.
And the personnel decisions, to me, there's an implied priority there. I don't know if I should connect the two, but that's something that would be helpful for us to understand as well. Because in terms of this aspect of, the hiring or adding staffs, like what we're going to hold on that, I can imply a priority of what I think it is, but it'd be good to hear a little bit about some of your conversation thought process around that as well. But let's kind of
I think a valid thing, because it's hard, it's very broad, there's a
Yeah.
lot of things going on. I think one of the, you can start with you could go below it, but you could say maintain service budget.
Mm-hmm.
We're not gonna do anything more than we're doing without any more resources than what we're doing. We're gonna maintain service level.
I think that's what we're going for.
And if you maintain service level,
Mm-hmm.
history shows contractual increases, cost of external things. There's more detail behind that. But you're already about a percentage and a half increase in the budget. If you just maintain
Right.
Mhm.
what you have.
Yes.
If you layer on some of these warrants, things that are important, you start to build on that. And so, I think that's the mindset it's good to have of just maintaining. Now, maybe you don't maintain in all areas. Maybe there's areas where you're
Offset, yeah.
Yeah, but you kind of start at a baseline of percentage and a half, and then anything extra you want to do on top of that adds to that. So that's where I think the prioritization becomes critical of saying, because there's a ton of great things we can do in town, from community service, community centers to
Police stations.
police stations to,
That's gonna happen.
and there's some nice to haves, there's some
Yeah.
must haves. I
Yeah.
think in past years, we've prioritized health and safety in terms of the building projects.
Exactly.
And I think that's where we need to look at this year
And I
and say,
just want to say also, but when you say level services, I think I think that message has kind of gone out this year. And I think it has stimulated, because year after year, you guys have said, well, are there any efficiencies you could institute?
Yeah.
This year, we're starting to see people come forward with some ideas.
it's great.
And I think it's because of the pressure on the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see that play out as well.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
People, we talked about reviewing fees
Yep.
and things like that. And suddenly that's now come to the forefront.
That's right.
Because if you didn't have to, well, you know, if you're gonna
Yeah.
get everything you wanted without doing that, why not?
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I think there's that worry that they're not gonna get everything you want, you know, so they really are looking hard.
Yeah.
And I think there will be some movement there for really getting some efficiencies.
Mhm. Yeah, and, you know, if efficiencies is an objective, there are ways that you can think through and how you incent that.
Well, I
Right.
think
You
level
can-
budgets and sent that
Level
really
budget's one
fast.
aspect, or you can, you know. you
For a
can
year.
Look
you
at
know,
from the
but-
standpoint
but-
of, you know, crowdsourcing, have a contest, right? You know, there's things
Yeah.
that you can do,
Yes.
and this is what I mean about priority, because the priority doesn't only reflect only with the lever of the budget, right? There are other things that, you know, you can think about in terms of trying to get to that place, because ultimately that is a key aspect of managing expenses, is to do things better. And our ex-board committee member, Tom, right, he was always the thing, efficiency. In fact, he actually met with, you know, some groups to try to think about ideas, but he's only one person, right? You know, you get more ideas out there, you know, have a contest of the best one, and you know, and if you get the best one, you get the funding to kind of support it, you know, something like that. You know, outside of just saying, hey, you know, we're going to kind of force you to because we're going to flatline the budget that way, which is a lever that you can pull.
I think another thing is sending the message. I mean, to some degree, we talk about what people want in terms of services and that sort of thing. And one of the things we have, everybody wants to live in a rural community as if we were in Dixville Notch, New Hampshire, okay? But they want services like Brookline, Massachusetts. And we have to balance those two things. And we have people who we're now hearing increased things of people who can't stay in their homes anymore because they can't pay the taxes.
And that is an
the fixed
increasing rate of
income
that.
is a real thing, and fixed means fixed. It's not going up at the rate taxes are going up. Taxes are going up at 3.5% per year for about 10 years now, and that's a significant amount if your income isn't going up by that amount. So those have to be balanced, and I think people are finally, or maybe not finally, but are increasingly aware of those opposing priorities of trying to limit the rate of tax increase and the realization that incomes aren't increasing at that same rate for a lot of people. And we.
So if I were to do a survey of the town, have we done a survey of the town? How do you feel about the tax increases over the last 5 years?
Everyone I've talked to are against them.
Everyone you've talked to.
rephrase that question.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
When
everyone,
they give up something they voted.
that's
Sure,
right.
yeah.
Right.
No, I absolutely.
You know,
The
in
only,
terms of that,
and I
right.
hear that, the thing that I always find fascinating is you get to town meeting, and, I mean, a couple of years ago, this committee brought the CPA thing,
Yeah.
saying, hey, this is 2%
right.
surcharge that isn't really matched that much anymore, and it's tied up. This is an opportunity to, and the town said, no, we want to keep this because,
That's right.
Understand.
or this project, typically, it seems like this town, despite the tax pressures, supports
Yeah.
well-thought-out projects
Yeah.
and budgets.
Yeah.
But, I mean, part of the problem is that there are a lot of people that do support that, but then there are a lot of people on fixed income.
That's right,
That's right.
That may not be at town meeting or may not be
that's right.
making their point heard very clearly, but are clearly under pressure.
But and so we asked, have we seen an increase in, you know, in terms of people who are unable to pay their taxes or can't pay their taxes or taking advantage of some of the.
Oh,
and-
senior, yeah, actually, the understanding I'm getting is there's gonna be a lot more coming off from the overlay for the senior tax work-off program. I think that's being utilized, there's more jobs on that. It's not a huge amount, but I think there are more seniors. That's
In
my understanding,
Carlisle?
that are taking advantage of it.
I'm looking at David, because my understanding is that
You're not
once
thinking
you had to declare it, you know, as income, that the
everybody
numbers fell off quite a bit. But if,
We had been, 7 years ago, the town had allocated $17,500 for the senior tax work-off program, and you could earn up to $700 off of your tax bill. by working for a town department.
700.
And a year in, I think maybe 2013 or 14, town meeting, we increased that amount to 700 to 1,000, which was the current limit, state limit at the time. The state limit has gone up to 1,500, but you can't pay an imputed amount that's more than the state minimum wage. So the number of hours that somebody has to work to get up to that total can be prohibited. So I wouldn't necessarily, for example, advocate going up to the 1,500, because I think some people have trouble working enough hours just to get to $1,000 off of their bill. But I think the point about before, at the state level, the amount that they're earning working for the town is tax-free, but unfortunately, the IRS wants Medicare tax withheld. So we have to, as Kim probably knows that from her job and her prior job, and it's forcing the towns to hire the people temporarily as employees and withhold that minimum amount of tax and that minimum, even participation in the state retirement plan, which is, talk about inefficient.
Right.
Because it's going in and they're already retired, then they can take it out. I think,
You can offset.
so what we have is at $1,000, and we're currently budgeting $25,000 off of the overlay, then it's 25 pure slots of $1,000. From a practical point of view, some people can't work all that, so we have some people working half slots or quarter slots. And I think what I recall from Angela mentioning in the past year, we might have used 23,000 out of the 25,000. So we're not quite, we have never hit that maximum amount.
Yeah.
I'd like to offer just a couple comments. You know, we discussed the personnel positions that were being proposed after they had come back from the Personnel Board. And I think we all found that some of they were all well thought out and worthwhile. But I think our general feeling was that this is a year that we need to think about the financial impact, and felt that I think we might have supported one over another, but felt that it wouldn't be appropriate in this budget year to increase a position or add a position anywhere in the town staffing. And I think I think that was the sense of the whole board. It was a unanimous decision. In terms of priorities, it's an interesting place we're in right now, because we have so many different efforts going on at the same time to think about the future of the town. So I'm specifically thinking of the master plan process, right, which is kind of over all this, but you have the planning board doing some really good thinking about, you know, how their staffing works, and you have the school going through a visioning process, and you have other boards going through kind of priorities. The Gleason Library has got a 5-year strategic plan. So I think we need to play a role with the master plan with all of these different groups, because I think that's really where we get that list of priorities that that the whole town hopefully feels invested in, and it's going to involve some choices.
So does that, just rephrase that, does that suggest that, so when I hear that, it suggests to me, well, we don't want to go investing a lot of money into different projects that might not be related, because we have yet to define a cohesive plan to be able to prioritize. So, to me, that would suggest we prioritize and we support projects that have to do with, if we're talking about investing in facilities, it is making sure the buildings are safe,
Yes.
they don't fall down,
But
they don't explode.
it's even more complicated than that, because there are some,
Yeah.
on our list of items for the FY '21 warrant, there are a couple big-ticket items, like replacing the rooftop unit on this building. The master plan's not going to help with that, but the issue is the unit is at the end of its lifetime. It's working now. It requires a lot of handholding from Steve Bastick and Bill Risso to keep it working. Can we stretch it out for another year and put off spending that $115,000 until the next fiscal year? Maybe.
That's where judgment comes in. Are
Yeah.
you
Right.
risking
Right.
Well,
additional
Yeah,
expense?
It's like the
and
school-
that kind of expense, though, is not going to ever be an abandoned expense, because we're probably not going to tear this building down. Let's say we moved, but the building would then be reused for something else. So it is worth
existing
doing that, you know.
Well, look at the emergency system, right? We're investing a lot of money. We supported it.
Yeah.
You supported it. In this thing that's not part of the master plan, but
Right.
there was a lot of discussion about, what's the lifetime of this thing? We're investing in this now because it's health and safety, and we're confident due diligence was done to suggest that in 10 years, it's not gonna be obsolete.
Right.
And it's not gonna be replaced. So that's a project we can get behind.
Right.
Versus something else,
Right.
again, looking at the warrants,
Well,
I don't know.
So, can we talk about, do you think, I think this is a good time to talk about the police station. Yeah,
Okay.
That's a tricky one.
it's, okay, so,
Well, so here's where we are with the police station. The initial pass at getting bids was way over what the budget amount was.
disastrous.
So we spent some time with the architect and with the police chief looking at the project and trying to reduce things as much as possible, consistent with the police department getting what they need to operate well.
For 10 years.
So we will have a new set of bid documents that will come out in January, and those will get rebid. It's likely that the amount of money, well, it's hard to predict what bids are going to be, because all the projects that have been bid lately have been above what the estimates were initially.
Significantly above.
But we need to get an idea of what the project will cost, and once we have that, we can decide what to do. And the choices are abandoning the project, which will not make the police department happy, trying to scale it back to fit within the amount of money that we have allocated, which may be hard, or coming up with some extra money. So one of the things that we've looked at, there are, in the cost of that project, there's a significant amount of money that addresses problems in that building that have existed maybe forever, that were uncovered in the process of looking at the building. Like, for instance, there's a plenum air system in the ceiling that returns air. And also in the ceiling are exposed wires. That violates the building code. It should never have been done that way, and it needs to be fixed. And that's a big ticket item. So one of the things that we've tried to do is to move some of those maintenance costs from the building project into the FY21 warrant article. Another example is the heating system in the top floor doesn't work, hasn't worked for a while. Right now, they can't use that upper floor. They have it closed off because there's no heat. So that's a problem. Whether we renovate the police station or not, both of those problems need to be addressed. So because of that, we've moved that into the FY21 warrant article.
Probably with the eye to that we may end up having to abandon the project. But regardless of whether we abandon the project or not, those things are not negotiable. They have to be taken care of.
And then there's the context of I'm sure the master planning process, how does that?
Which is why we would be more apt to abandon the project, because we don't want to spend a lot of money in that building for,
Right.
for us to then abandon those costs, because they really don't do what the police really need. And,
Right.
we thought we could do what the police really needed for the original amount, and that it would be good for 10 years. Now that we're finding that we can't, and it's not good for 10 years, it doesn't seem.
Changes it.
It changes the whole picture, but there's still sizable portion of that money that still has to be spent regardless, for, again, health, safety, and welfare, because.
Yep.
And it's ridiculous to abandon a third floor of the building half of the year because they cannot use it. I mean, it's.
No, and we have a facilities manager now who has been
Yes.
doing wonderful things, and he has been able to nurse the chiller at the library lawn to get it through this past summer. Whether we can do that again for another summer, maybe. There's some chance the heating unit at the police station is up in the ceiling, and part of the problem is getting to it is almost impossible. Steve has done some diagnosing work on it and discovered that there's power to it, and it looks as if it ought to work. So maybe it's something as simple as a controller that could be fixed. Like he fixed a unit at the library by finding on eBay a controller card for, I think, $40.
Efficiencies.
Yes.
Which is why we wanted to expand his hours so he could do more things like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Part of the problem.
but we're not, because
So
we're trying to help them.
nursing these units along has some cost and has risk, because maybe next year we won't be able to find a controller card on eBay.
Right.
And can't make that unit work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had talked, I mean, one of the things we're gonna discuss, you wanna bring up the centralized maintenance budget?
can-
So the,
Oh, okay.
you know,
Yeah.
as part of the operating budget,
Mhm.
last year we talked about it, and we didn't have a
Yes.
facility manager. The question
Mhm.
this year
Yep.
for the Board of Selectmen is, we certainly can see potential financial benefits from doing that.
Yes.
Is that something the board supports, and do we have the resources to support that? We don't want to
Well-
create bureaucracy,
Right.
but we want to provide a centralized maintenance function so
Right.
that we can
So what-
leverage the buildings of town instead of having a series of silos that,
Right.
I know there's different issues at different buildings, but I know the
When you-
library director does not want to be maintaining.
When you ask the question, do we have the resources, what kind of resources are you talking about?
A facility manager.
Yeah, we
Well,
have a
We
facility.
have a
manager.
facility
This
manager.
is more of the
but-
day-to-day.
Yeah.
But he's a part-time facility
Right.
manager.
Yes.
Right.
There's capacity for him to be able to take on
Right.
more, right?
Right.
Which again goes back to the whole aspect of the priorities and objectives, right? You know, I think you can say, well, we're not going to increase hours or whatever, or or people.
Yeah.
But then, is that really the smartest thing to do when you have this burgeoning issue with potentially having him to be able to stretch some of these aging things out, to allow us to kind of spread things
And
out a
save
little
the
further?
town considerable amounts of
That's
money.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
Right.
he's found things, or been able to spend just enough time on things to think about your office. You know,
Yes,
one little
It's been up
valve
on my,
changed her office by 10 degrees.
Yes.
Is that right?
And
Wow.
it did, yeah, they're up in there, it was really
without
cold.
him, there's no one to sort of
They
Do
were in
that
there quite a bit.
troubleshooting.
Yeah.
troubleshoot
Yeah.
that, that's
Yeah.
important, troubleshooting.
Yeah.
Wasn't there the issue of a clogged toilet somewhere that was something like $500 or something like that?
In the
You know,
past.
someone in a building has to call a number of some
Yes.
plumber.
Oh,
and-
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. right.
And we don't have there's financial efficiencies if we, and I don't know if that means more hours, but there's financial efficiencies if we can cross-leverage
Yes.
expertise
Yes.
and
It-
resources.
It
and we don't
does
have
mean a
people-
little bit more hours because he's pretty well maxed out at this point. And one of the, and there's a lot of procurement, so we're thinking about some ways of taking that off of his lap so they would have more hours to just do the hands-on things. And we're looking at ways, we thought maybe Jen might take a
Yeah.
class or two and she might take on procurement.
Yeah.
part of
In
her
a certain sense,
duties.
if you think of it this way too, and I don't know, I don't think there are particular departments or groups that have this situation, but I think longer term, you look at it from this standpoint, right? I hear from the librarian that she spends a good amount of time trying to handle these things. Well, if you increase the hours of the facility manager, you're actually preventing having to hire additional people in the library, or actually you're increasing the level of service in the library.
Right.
Of doing that, and you're making it more efficient, because I'm sure she's not,
Right,
maybe
her-
she is, maybe she has all the experience
No,
of
her
knowing the
professional
best,
training is not-
pricing for everything, right? Or the best way of doing it, now you're getting more efficiencies in that.
Yeah.
I agree, but how do we roll that out? And especially.
Priorities.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And this is something we need to communicate. If it's a priority, we communicate to the town. This is how, we're not managing it by saying we're just gonna do 0%, whatever, all these different things.
Yeah.
The way that we're managing things long-term is we're gonna make smart decisions on efficiencies. Here's an example, with maintenance. This is what we're gonna centralize the budget, we're gonna increase the hours this is what it means. So there is an aspect of communication, so people understand when they look at, they're adding more hours, more heads here, it's like, that's the first inclination. But when they understand its implication in terms of why.
Well,
I think maintenance is unique, though, in that the idea is that it's actually a return on investment.
Yeah.
Unlike a lot of.
That's
it's-
right.
It's unique in that you're not doing it so that you provide better service to the residents.
That's right.
Because, you're doing it
Yeah.
because we feel like we're spending a lot of money inefficiently. And if we had someone that could manage that smartly, that by
Yeah.
spending X dollars, we'd save 2X or 3X
right.
or 4X. It's a high
Exactly.
leverage point
Yes.
financially.
Yeah.
It's the problem where I always say.
Not every request is like that. I acknowledge that.
Expenses
That's right.
show up
Right.
on a budget, but savings don't.
Yeah.
That's the
But in
problem.
That's
this
right.
case, we have
That's
we've
right.
been documenting a list of
Yeah.
savings.
We're trying hard to
We've
do that.
been documenting a list of
So-
savings just because of that.
And that's why I changed
And
the
again,
bucket, right? The
not
bucket
every-
is not the head, the bucket is efficiencies, right?
Yeah.
That's why we're doing something
Well,
like this.
I think there are efficiencies which are starting to get thought about in the town
Mhm.
overall. I think we can, this is a good conversation to be
is the i-
having about.
And it sounds like the idea of like holding the line on staff requests is kind of forcing that, figure
Yeah.
out how to do it.
Is.
Don't,
Do it
don't just
another-
do what you're
Is there
doing.
a different
That's right.
way you
There's-
do,
'cause there's-
can we do it another way?
Yes.
If
Can we
they,
do it another?
if they can't do it another way, if they can't, or if they can't let another want or need go in order to have this, but it has to be a need, not a want.
Mm-hmm.
But, then I think we can talk about it.
And that's easier to do within a department,
Yeah.
where you can show that, okay, we're taking money we used to spend here, and we're putting it in here, and by the way, now, we overall, we can spend even less. And
Right.
That's easy to do. Across departments, that's a lot tougher to do, because in this town, we don't have a mechanism set up for doing that.
Yes, that's
Right.
right.
We need that mechanism. For instance, a facilities manager is something that's across all the departments, but we really don't have a centralized location to do the analysis, to come in and say, if we spend an extra $15,000 in salary on this, we're gonna save $75,000 in maintenance costs. And that's what we need.
How do- what is that mechanism?
Right.
I mean, we don't have it in this town. So
We don't have it in this town.
So the priority would be figuring out what that mechanism is.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. I mean, we're all volunteers.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
not here day to day. We don't know,
We can kind of do that retrospectively,
We can.
but not
Right.
prospectively.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and retrospectively works, I mean, you can use history to look forward as well. And that's what we have to do right now. Because that's the only mechanism we have available to us.
Well, and, one of the things we've talked about is like the energy savings, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Typically,
Yes.
that just gets absorbed, right? I mean, the streetlights
We
would
never-
say,
and we
"Poof,
never
that
see
money's
it."
gone,"
Yeah.
right? The
With the
school,
bucket
there
truck
was,
request, though.
thousands. Well, yeah,
I'm sure that those
Right,
things
well,
are
see,
working.
Right,
Yeah.
but, like the school, there was energy efficiency, and poof, that money just disappears, right? I think part of it is, also too, if we can track that sort of
Yeah.
stuff
Yes.
better, then maybe we roll that into salary
That's right.
for, instead of it just going into a bucket to, and this isn't poo-pooing Nathan's proposal, but it's, maybe that goes into a bucket to help pay for the facilities manager who ultimately pays things back, and I think one of the things that we're looking at now is fee structure, right? If, maybe it's that the fees have been low, and, if there really is a need, the fees for some of the departments, Board of Health, Conscom, right? We may not be able to cover all of the hours, based on those fees, but maybe even if we could supplement that some more, so I think there's a lot of different things that we have to look at.
One caveat to that, and as a sideline to another conversation, is we talked about, at a high level, taking a look at revolving funds in this town. And,
Yes.
and
there's a
you know,
lot
we
of
just had
stagnant
preliminary
money.
conversations and make,
Right.
because
Well,
we need to be
exactly.
able to track and quantify and understand, but what we don't want to do necessarily is add even more.
That's right.
Right.
So there's
Yeah,
an
'cause sometimes
there's
the
an
two get-
inefficiency to that, right?
There's inefficiency in that, and then you're, for instance, the sticker one, you've got 140,000, that's that's a number just goes across every year, but you're bringing in 49 and you're spending 49.
Right.
So if you had that revenue go in the general fund and you appropriate that,
Yep.
you'd see it, and then you
But we
could
have to track
close
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That
It's- it-
extra money
right,
that
you
you
have to
could
track
then,
Yeah.
you know, spend on other things, like a facilities manager. Same thing with taking all the budgets, line parts of each individual budget, putting it in a centralized maintenance thing. You would see that history would start to create itself of what you took, you know, all this, whatever number that is, 100,000 or whatever, and then you'd see what you had at the end of the year. Are you over or under? Because right now, it's just shifting it within the
Well,
budget.
Department
right
head.
now, we don't know
But
if
you
their
don't know
maintenance
if you
line
have
is
enough
being spent on
outright.
maintenance.
I mean,
And-
we can go back and look at the actuals, but it's hard. It's,
That's hard.
hard.
You don't have, you don't have a great number that's just maintenance that's in there, but
Yeah.
you go through a
And-
lot of the
and
bills of
maintenance-
who you regularly do for maintenance. and you
Yeah,
pull
but
it out on a
maintenance also,
vendor and
I
you-
mean, the fire
do it.
department has, they have a maintenance budget, but they spend like 100,000 of it on their trucks. Well, that's not helping
No,
the
no, but
building.
you
I
would
mean,
pull
so
that
I wouldn't
out
wanna
of
take
what
that
fund?
out of,
Right.
you
no,
know, put
there's,
a,
You have
general
vehicle,
municipal
you have
facility
then a line
maintenance.
for them for vehicle maintenance, and you would
Right.
have whatever would be building maintenance, would
Right.
be a line that would be.
so we're talking about taking out only
So-
building
right.
maintenance.
So
when
again,
people-
you'd-
So, but,
whatever makes sense, and it's probably not
It's-
all
it's-
gonna be
right.
perfect.
It's not gonna be
No.
perfect.
No,
in
it's
the
gonna
first
take
years.
time
It's gonna
to-
take
yeah.
time.
So that-
And I think, okay, so in terms of priorities, what I would say is that I think that overall, we want to have a target of a certain percentage of the value of the buildings in that maintenance fund. I don't know what that is. I think the architects say 3%. But, so I-
And
it
the
would
amount
be,
of money we've been spending
To
has
get to there.
been vastly less than.
Oh, sure.
yes,
And that's why
yes.
we're making up for
Yeah.
trouble.
Right.
So,
Yes.
so we could start by taking out this little bit of maintenance.
And we've talked about
And then I think we
taking
need to,
excess free cash and creating a capital stabilization fund so that we can deal with.
that's another
So that's something
great
we
idea.
hear, and we're gonna,
Yes.
That's what
we're
I
gonna
think
work
that's-
with Kim to set
Okay,
that up.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly, because I've been asking for that for
kind
a
of-
couple
well,
of years.
It smooths it out.
We're at the,
It
we,
does.
we
It-
did
you
that,
gotta
we
smooth
essentially
out-
did that with the high school project, but we've kind of come off that, and now we're
Yeah,
back to a free cash standpoint where we want to have a
Go with
specific target each year, and if we're above it, or if we have receipts coming higher,
Right, higher.
it goes to a stabilization fund.
yes, and that is good, because that's, we need to be able to smooth those bumps out.
It'll smooth
And
the
that will
tax.
keep the tax,
So you're not,
so we, so we're,
the weird thing, the other odd thing with our budget compared to other towns is we have this, a lot of our budget is determined by the high school, which is determined by our
Yes.
allocation. So this year, it's working in our favor.
That's right.
yeah.
But it
our-
might not next year.
But
it might
and
not
that's-
next year.
So
That's a swing that,
we have to also be careful of that.
yeah,
Don't know.
because-
That's right.
that's right.
But like Scott says, if you have a swing where you have, children there and that, then you take that difference that you would plan for next year and put it
Yeah.
into something.
We'd say,
That's
well,
right.
next year it's
For the
probably
next
gonna
year,
be,
Stabilization
you
funds,
bank it to
anytime
pay
you-
it
right.
forward,
That's
basically.
right.
because we
And
don't,
then the year you don't. and then
what
you're
we don't
starting
want to
build
do
back.
is just
Right.
ratchet the taxpayer. It's
Right.
up
Yeah.
4%,
Yep.
0%. So we want to, to the best of our ability, have a plan, smooth it out. And if we have a good year for some reason, for some event, and
Right,
we're not
Yeah.
just, hey, guess what?
Right.
Your taxes are,
That's right.
we want to think about, because if we do that this year, next year, when the allocation flips the other way, then it's a big
We
thing.
can use
So
some of that and.
part of that's
keep
what we
this
look at is how do we manage the longer
Because
term
they'll
trend?
remember the increase, but they won't remember the
Right,
decrease.
right, that's
Absolutely.
right, that's right.
Absolutely. But we also can't squander the money.
That's right.
When we have those savings.
no.
Yeah.
We really have to be very careful about planning what we do with that.
Absolutely.
And
That's
not
right.
just absorb it and,
No.
Yeah.
right.
And it's
Or
tracking
sitting
it too,
stagnant.
right, in terms of
Yeah.
what those savings are and ensuring, because I was actually thinking about that as we we're discussing, it's like we have this question, what efficiencies are you going to, you potentially could do this year? We never go back the next year and say, oh, you wrote that on the piece of paper, what did you do about it, last
Yeah,
year,
no.
right? But that's the whole aspect of, kind of driving that through with regards to that.
And that's, I mean, well, it doesn't have anything to do with taxes, it's the going to the aggregated power. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
We now have a number
Yes.
that says how much we
That's what I'm
saved by
saying.
doing
As a
that, you know,
town.
as a town.
it was
As town
25
resident. Unfortunately, the town
225K.
buildings didn't benefit from it, but
Yeah.
but the residents certainly did.
Yeah,
The solar, like the solar project,
right.
we need to follow,
Yeah.
what is that generating, and then that,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm trying to think what else. the other-
Yeah. But
Okay,
do we want
so-
to, just quickly in terms of, because I think what helps for us to, also is your kind of thoughts on the warrants that are kind of coming through, because that will be obviously kind of factored in our conversations. So the last one that Tim sent, I think the big one was the maintenance was
Yeah,
$499, and then
No,
I think there's
it's-
the
the biggie.
proverbial high school parking lot.
It has
Yeah,
a,
There's 800 there.
We get to vote on that first.
We do. So,
the
Wait, Jerry,
the
yeah.
maintenance warrant, actually,
Change?
I have the latest numbers here.
okay.
Is that the one sent out this
Oh,
afternoon?
yeah,
Yeah.
well, because we added the police to,
So the number we're up to is 807,000.
807,
807?
807 for maintenance.
237,
That's a big number.
and 13
it
cents.
is. But we might be giving you 850K back.
Well, there you go.
Well, there are
Well, we're not spending it.
several caveats. If people, I have several copies of this, if people don't have them.
Yeah.
There are several caveats here. We don't have a number for repairing the salt shed yet. There are a couple items for the fire department that have to do with heat pumps and hot water systems that are eligible through green communities. So it's possible that anywhere from 0 to 100% of those could be funded by grants.
Are these by any chance,
Yeah, the same
in
grant that we just
jeopardy?
said we're not gonna go for,
No, it would be in the next cycle.
the following year.
Yeah, but we,
It's the
I mean, that's,
request-
we have a 3-year window on the warrant article, so,
Yeah. Oh, okay.
okay, all right, because, see,
and,
that's part of the
Right.
thing, you see?
and the library chiller might possibly be part of that as well.
It's not in there now.
But it's not in there now.
That's correct. Oh,
so-
it's not in the warrant? article?
807.
807?
Oh, the library chiller is in.
Is.
Oh, it
Yeah,
is, okay.
Yeah, so, so the point is that of the 807, some of it could be reimbursed down the line.
Well,
Or-
and the other point to make is that the problem that we deal with all the time is we have this list of things that need to get done. And,
You do them all in 1 year.
well, we try not to do them all in 1 year, and we try to put things
Right.
off as makes sense to do. But when we're looking at, like at the library, their roof has a lot of problems, and if they don't get addressed, it will affect the lifetime of the building.
Mhm.
So if we put it off, then the leaky gutters will erode the bricks, and it will be a bigger problem next year.
Right.
And then
So
sometimes like,
are you- So on your list, are you, the 807,000, is that a set of priorities that you have put in some
Yes.
kind of order?
Well, these
Kind of
are,
most
there's
critical?
more for next year.
no,
Yeah.
these are the high priority
Right.
items we've selected out of a much longer
Yes,
list of
that's
things
what I-
that are
right.
waiting to happen.
But if you're waiting for their grant money and you know you won't do them all in 1 year, do you do 400 this year and 400 next year?
Well, but, I mean, for some of these, we may not be able to
Budgeted.
wait for grant money.
Budgeted, or you want to budget.
But for the purpose of the taxpayer, we say, we hope to get a grant, but we have to,
Right, yeah.
Not count
Sequester
on
the
that,
money, yeah.
right, we have to,
we have to present it as not having the grants, like we've done in the past.
right. And so in your opinion, or the group's opinion, these are the items that you would say we really must do in this next fiscal year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, and again, I mean, could we put something off? Well, I mean, you can cross your
Right.
fingers and put it off
Right.
and hope that it doesn't fail.
That's right.
Well, that's what I'm thinking about, the school elevator, right? That's a good example of,
Also, too, though, with some of these grants, are we maxing them out? I mean, are we, you know, like for a chiller unit, right? So maybe we can get it, maybe we can't, but do we have other chiller units that we can apply for, say, 2? Even though it's not at the end of its lifespan, per se, you know, which ours appears to be 25 to 50 years. I
You
don't
know,
know.
all of our
25
chiller
is.
units need to go,
But-
for every single building we have.
Yeah, so that's the thing, but I mean, you know, if one's, you know, 2 years out, why don't we apply for grants now? You know, I mean,
Right. We are.
kind of just max out, but are we really maxing out all our grant
Yeah.
opportunities? I mean, you know,
I don't know.
and I know,
What we're
We had a
maxing out are
grant
the
writer
people
on
who
our-
can write them.
well, this is it.
We had a
so-
grant writer in our list of wants
Right,
that we
but-
decided not to support.
Right, but was that a stupid decision,
Well,
right?
I'm-
Because could we have
exactly, that's a
maxed
good
those things
question.
out? Like,
It's
you know,
a
I have no idea what opportunities are out. I mean, I know some, but the vast
Right.
majority of them I
Right.
don't.
If you
Well,
had
I'm-
somebody
I'm ju-
dedicated.
I'm just
Money
becoming
around that.
familiar with the
You
green
wanna-
community stuff.
Yeah.
Think of the
And
return on that.
My understanding is that
Identify one
in order
big
to
one.
get the grant, you have to,
Plus it would
you have to
liberate
get
Steve.
a third party to put it together.
What it was
And it gets evaluated based on the energy savings.
Right.
So just replacing a chiller because it's failing doesn't get you anything unless you replace it with a more efficient chiller.
Right.
Which may be more efficient, but may be more expensive.
Right, well,
Like you
yeah.
get grants on your house when you do the right furnace or.
Yeah, 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 no, and that's the thing. I mean, it's more efficient, but it's more expensive, so does it
Right.
pay for itself?
Well, but,
Or does it
but
not?
Well,
one,
it
the-
does
we
because of the
can,
grant.
if,
Well, if you can get the grant.
Yeah.
right,
we
so,
can
yeah.
get some synergy. If we fund the cost of replacing the comparable unit and the green communities funds the cost of making it an air pump unit that will save the town $5,000 a year.
Right,
That's a good deal
Yeah.
if we can make it happen.
right, if we can make it happen, yeah, yeah.
So going back to the warrant, so obviously maintenance, big item. I just, Tim, you just sent me something with some detail around complete streets. It's another 250, right?
Oh, yeah.
More than likely, that's the engineering estimate.
Right. So half of the 500 is what would go into the
Plans to
warrant.
go to bid early next year, so we'll know definitively what
Right.
the.
So if I placeholder 250, I'm at 1.9 million, including your adjustment there,
In warrants.
in warrants.
Wait,
I think it's actually
Oh.
like 200. Not that that's a huge difference, but,
Yeah.
but it was,
So I have 807 for the
Well,
maintenance,
this
the
would-
800 for high school parking lot.
That would be only be
Oh,
our
you're
portion,
counting the
though.
Oh, that's
parking
right. I have to figure our portion of, sorry,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
threw that
Figure
whole thing.
20
Oh, yeah.
20
Quarter of that.
quarter, so 200.
250.
So it's 250, so there's a million there, a million two, it's probably about the same number as I have down there. It's about 1,000,003.
Some of this would be debt, I'm assuming some of it would be debt funded
Yep.
if it passed. Which, just
Just
from
pushes
an
it off.
annual standpoint, just spreads it out.
Yep.
It's not hitting you all.
Mhm.
What, Cranberry Bog,
That's a small
Greeno,
one, yeah.
are those CPA, is Greeno,
is that the dam?
is that taking the dam or?
is that
gonna come up?
CP, is that gonna be, is there a warrant, or is that, are you looking at CPA funds, or what's the latest?
CPA before we go to warrant.
Does it look like we could use, have you talked to
We get money
CPA at
for
all
that,
about it?
don't we, in
Yeah, I-
CPA? Let's not sit on that CPA money. Let's spend it if we can. I mean,
Okay.
That as well,
Yeah.
that we have updated.
I just know, that's a big number, right? Like,
Yeah,
the
what-
that's a big project, but you, we think, okay.
We haven't had the time to pursue it.
Right.
Really flat out.
Yep.
but CPA would be,
I believe so, yeah.
Would be
Yeah, yeah,
able-
because we
it's-
explored it, yeah.
okay, I mean, it's not that they wouldn't support, it doesn't matter, I mean, but they might not be allowed to do some of these things, because
Yeah.
you can't do
No,
repairs, but they can do this or that, or the, you know.
Yeah, no,
all
I'm
these
pretty sure
arcane
that,
rules.
that was allowable.
So was there anything else that was fairly substantial? I have a lot of little ones here on my list that, it came from Tim. That was about a month back. But I don't know if there's any other updates for anything else besides Jerry's,
What about,
Adjustments in his.
so you have about 400,000 for capital budget again? As like cherry pickers and?
Long-term caps?
Long-term caps?
Yeah, so, we met last week, we have a little over 700,000 in requests, in looking at those items. Yeah, we're, essentially, at least the initial guideline's gonna be flat, and then we'll lean through that list, because I think there's a number of things in there. I think the biggest new adds, DPW had,
Yeah, I saw his
there's a
list.
carryover request from last year for a bucket truck, which we had discussed last year. there's a request for a roll-off truck, which is 200,000. I think even if you were in favor of that, I think that would have to be a separate warrant article. It's my opinion in terms of, that's a big number to put into a long-term caps.
That one seems to me like, that's all transfer station. Seems to me we should be able to apply some of our fees to that.
There's, from a capital, Gary had provided a schedule of,
Well, I mean,
But if you closed and did it.
yeah, yes, I mean, because that would be half of it right there.
Right.
I mean, he does a lot with a little, and he's very good about working with what he gets, but he does have equipment needs coming up
Yeah, he does, I know.
beyond this year, so, I mean, looking at that in terms of how we address the equipment needs, in addition to the salt shed over the next few years is important. The other important thing to ask this committee is, there's a bunch of recurring expenses that we're looking at moving into the operating budget because they're not really capital items.
That's right.
All for it.
Second piece is, are you in favor of proposing the bylaw amendment that would essentially eliminate long-term caps and have the finance committee essentially, in addition to the warrant article for the operating budget, would propose a warrant that would include the long-term capital items? There's a lot of overlap between committees right now. I think both committees, we haven't taken a formal position, but
Well-
people seem in favor.
That's on your list.
Want to straw poll?
Yeah.
Which
Yes.
one is it?
I think it's, yeah.
We talked about it for
Yeah.
special town meeting, but we held off on it
Yes,
for
yes,
reasons.
no,
but-
I
Oh,
think
yeah.
you certainly have support from this board for that.
think we-
I've already, when I first came on, I was already questioning the,
Why, it was different, broken up.
It does, yeah.
yeah, the whole thing, and first of all, it really should be your committee, not our committee, because it's, which gets over that hump of originally FinCom members, or in fact, FinCom members are still not supposed to be on any other committee that had anything to do with money.
Change the bylaw.
So, and we did change the bylaw around that, but, except for the long-term caps. And really what we should have done was say, the
Collapse it,
long-term caps really is your committee, and it's not a separate committee, and it's, so I totally agree. We
And I-
need to streamline that.
Practically, I think when we move the recurring expenses into the budget, you're gonna be looking at $150,000 to $200,000 in miscellaneous items. Anything larger than that becomes a separate warrant, so having a separate
Yes.
committee and having the departments have to meet with the separate
And,
committees.
and if it has to do with facilities, you're gonna
Yeah, and if
kick
it's,
that over to
and if
facilities.
it's a big enough item, it becomes its own warrant, so it's
Right.
really a small number
I
of.
So
totally
I
agree.
have one question about the members of the long-term cap subcommittee of FinCom.
Yes.
And one question is, I think it's necessary that they be allowed to be appointed by people that aren't on FinCom.
Why is that?
Well,
There would be no long-term caps committee.
There wouldn't be a long-term caps committee.
no more
The
committee.
long-term cap subcommittee of FinCom.
I don't even know if it would be an official subcommittee. I think
Okay.
we would just
Well,
recommend a
I think-
long-term caps warrant.
Yeah.
It's useful to have some people from other town departments, like the school committee, have substantial input into long-term caps.
But Jerry, if we're spending 200,000 on long-term caps and spending millions on the schools separately, it just seems like, redundant.
Okay.
Well, as part of the budget, I mean, we
Yeah,
spend a
yeah,
fair
part
amount of
of the
time
process.
Yeah.
with I mean, we
With
can
the
talk
school.
about it more,
And
but.
unless people feel from the schools that they're not getting an adequate audience in front of the finance committee for
Right.
everything
Right.
they need.
They just want to spend
Yeah.
their time.
Well, I believe,
Because we asked the question, right? It's in our questionnaires, like, in terms of the different needs that they have in operating expense.
Well, I
and
thi-
whatnot.
I
So
think-
it becomes one conversation is what it ends up being, right?
I
As
think
opposed to separate
the
ones.
way Concord does it, or at least the way they did it last time I looked at it, first of all, they have a FinCom that has 1 million members.
Yeah.
And there is a long-term caps subcommittee of FinCom that deals with long-term caps issues.
Yeah, we barely were able to fill the 7. It took us a couple of years to get to the 7.
Yeah, in any event, I think whatever we do, it requires a bylaw change, so that would be a warrant article, and.
Well,
this
we
board
are
would have to recommend it.
reviewing the bylaw as we speak. In fact, wasn't that on a upcoming? Yes, and aren't we, don't we have that on an upcoming meeting soon? It wasn't in January?
Yeah.
town council making a presentation. So, yeah,
This is
this
for
is the
us.
time to do it, folks.
We didn't
Yeah.
get that. We did this.
So, you certainly have our support about that.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I
It
don't
just makes
think,
all kinds of
I think
sense.
we would wanna have you recommend that, but I don't know that we would wanna.
It will be
Yeah,
coming from
we would-
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense to me, but I think a
Yeah.
third party should.
As I said, we are reviewing the bylaws, all the bylaws right now, and
Mhm.
All
would
the
certainly come under that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Just,
All the, all the
plugging away
procedures
at
have-
it.
Well, the.
2 or
the-
3 at a time.
Well, those are the bylaws that we're looking, that's,
Oh,
that's the policy and
That's right, you're right,
policy. But
That's right.
we'll do the bylaws in kind of one swell swoop, you know, but,
One swell poop.
Swell food, yeah.
It'll be
that.
swell.
Well, that's right.
I gotta Google what a foop is, though.
Yeah.
That's right. The swell we got. I'm not sure what the food. It's a new word. I think this has been a good conversation.
no, I
tonight.
agree,
And,
I agree.
I don't know if there's anything outstanding, at least from FinCom, because I did post. So from a FinCom perspective, was there anything that we missed in terms of,
But-
we discussed yesterday? Did you feel that there's anything that we want to cover off on this evening?
No, I'm still worried about, you know, one point, how many million in warrant articles? And
Yeah.
how much for, you know, 700, and, you know, and for the LTC, for the long term, okay, you will it down
Yeah.
to 400? But even, you got those other things that were recurring things that you're gonna put in the operating,
Well,
but
we'll
they're
look
still
at
in the
that.
now that you can.
We're gonna look
Are
at
you
them,
going
don't
to
worry.
swell the operating budgets by that amount, or are you gonna ask people to absorb them in their operating budgets now?
We're all taxpayers.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
well, so that's,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, that's what I'm
Yeah.
worried
Yeah.
about.
But you're not alone, Kate.
Yeah.
I'm no,
Yeah.
I know I'm,
Have another bourbon.
no, I can't sleep alone,
I
I
think,
can't sleep at night because a puppy keeps on kicking.
I think
They have their own vineyard.
the trickiest of all these is the warrant, because ultimately, at the end of the day, all we can do and all you can do is take a position.
Yeah,
And it's up to the
right.
town then, which is ultimately,
Exactly.
all this is just up to the town.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but I
we
think,
don't have to
I
put it in front of
agree
the
with
town.
you, but I also think all of us
Yeah.
need to take a leadership role
yeah.
in not just putting it forward, but to, you were partly addressing this, right? By
Yeah.
talking about how we explain things, and I think we need to do it in advance as
Oh,
well
yeah.
as
That's right.
during the warrant. And I know you don't always reach everybody beforehand,
Oh,
but
yeah.
still, I think,
Yeah.
I think we all need to be prepared to speak
We need to look
Yeah.
at how we,
for the things we think are really important, and the,
especially for
Yeah.
the big warrants, how can we
Yeah.
fund these things? Does it all have to be, is some stuff we can do with debt? I mean, we have to
Debt.
look at
Yeah.
some of those mechanisms, so we're not
yes.
trying to do 30 years of maintenance and put it all in a year.
Right,
We can
that's
spread that
right.
over
That's
20
what I said,
years,
yeah.
and
Right.
let's spread it
Well,
over 20 years.
Exactly.
There's something
Yeah.
No, we,
that won't get done, that you don't wanna hold up that you'll vote.
So
yeah,
is that
I
something
can tell you, there's
Yeah,
another.
we'll look,
Right.
we
you
look
are
at,
working on
we look at funding
Yeah, we're
sources.
looking at
Yeah.
funding sources.
and over time, over what period of time? Yeah,
And it depends on the equipment, but
yeah.
you don't want to make next year's taxpayer
Right.
carry the burden
Down
of
20
30 years of
years.
maintenance.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
So you have to
right.
look, well, we're making up for maintenance, we're gonna push it forward, and then the other problem is if you approve something, spend all the money next year, then everyone
Right.
resets the following year, but when you have the debt on the books, you know, that expense is still there, and.
Yep.
So we gotta look at that.
No, we,
It's still there and it builds every time you
Builds-
add
no,
more.
but you don't forget those projects, at least they're,
Yeah.
it's not like
That's right.
spent in.
That's right.
and then, the other thing, of course, that's looming is that master plan.
Yes.
And we're a little
Yeah.
worried about what wonderful, great ideas they will be coming up with. And I don't, want to discourage them, but most of them will, I'm assuming, will have price tags attached to them. So I am concerned about not, kind of shooting our wad now and having something in reserve so that we can be kind of happy about these ideas and not say,
Your debt will fall off, I think it's 5 or 6 years down the road that it's a significant
Yeah.
dip, that would be the time.
It doesn't
So I
feel
did a
like there's
10-year
much that's
projection
build a new
now
Okay.
of the
consolidated
debt,
on
which
what
I
we're
can
trying
show
to do
you
here.
is
A lot of
actually
the
shows
maintenance
it
is.
go down to where you get
That's true.
a
Yeah.
low that if you wanna build
The
it
school
back,
parking lot
that
is
would
a
be the
different story,
time
but that's.
to schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So we should start thinking about things we want to spend a lot of money on?
Yeah.
5 years.
5 or
5
6
years.
years from now. When, Somebody else would be making the decisions.
Yes.
But my hope, though, is
Suckers.
that they're also looking at town, how can we manage growth?
Yeah,
The fast
that's
pass
the
on
thing.
Rotary.
That's right.
Right.
The 250 toll on the Rotary will be great.
Right,
Every,
right.
You can even do easy pass.
Every road into Carlisle, right? Yeah.
marijuana field.
One of two things, right? You get the revenue, or you improve our traffic situation around there, right?
Yeah,
People
Well,
go,
we're gonna do
ways
some
will
of
have
that
them go
with
around.
complete streets, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, well, if we can afford complete streets.
Yeah.
'Cause,
Big number.
Very good.
Well, that's
we'd have
another-
to see those bids.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's another big safety issue, too. Yeah.
And then do we jeopardize our grant on that if we don't go forward, or do we have some time? Do we have a deadline on doing complete streets?
Technically, the deadline is the end of June, but we can extend it if we've got an active project.
Right,
So we can't
so
just-
by June, we'll know whether we're doing this project or not.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
By
Well,
June, we'll know.
this is
Well,
helpful.
because yes,
So we'll convene next week to talk a little bit more about essentially the budget guidance, but we'll keep
Guideline,
guideline. Sorry.
guidelines, right.
We'll keep close in touch. Don't necessarily maybe have to set up another special meeting, because we want to try to set up the letter by the end of the year. But we'll
Okay.
make sure that we
Okay.
keep you apprised.
Yeah.
And so I kept all the numbers off, and I was very successful all the way up past an hour of talking about numbers. But just to give you a little bit of a sense, I think given the FY '21 requests, if you just kind of add them all up, operating budget.
do that.
You're not saying we're gonna do that? 1.2% before COLA and long-term debt and long-term caps. So just the core operating
It's a better starting point than previous years.
This is for.
Partly
Operating budget.
operating
This is
budget.
all of the,
But what I want to know, is this just town, or town and schools?
Town and schools.
Town and
Now,
schools.
Partly
And
that,
long-term caps.
just so we don't think that we have room to spend on this, partly that's driven from the regional school.
The decrease.
The decrease, because of the shift.
change in
Yeah.
population.
If we didn't have that change, it would have added another 0.6%. So we'd be 1.8. So it was a fairly, we had a decrease. Concord had obviously an increase, but the core operating growth, expense growth was 2.6. It's just that they bore all of it. We
More of
actually.
it, yeah.
It's not a bad, that's before the guideline.
That's
it's
right.
not a bad
In
starting.
fact, that's not, yeah, okay.
Yes.
And thank you for pushing the warrants earlier.
Yes.
And
That helps
we
a
look
lot.
forward to
Give a lot of people
continuing.
heartburn, but I think it was worth it.
Yes.
I think last year, again, we've been drifting later and later
Yeah.
to finalize things. So the more we can do this year to lock things down, so we can get the warrant book out, so we can have these conversations,
Yeah.
we really have to push on that, because
Mm-hmm.
I think town meeting's a little bit earlier, and it takes time for us, once everything's finalized, to put together all the numbers in the warrant letter. So we'll be talking about that timeline, but the more we can kind of stop the conversations and make some decisions, the better.
Thank you
Good.
very much.
Yeah,
to
thank you.
oblige.
Thank you.
So I think that's it. Unless somebody have some liaison, we've done everything else.
Basically,
Well, I can do it again. To be called on.
Had to, because
for
we would
the
try
operating
to, and we've had excess money. You could absorb them. I mean, we had to prioritize, but when I gave the information.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we did talk about you guys, about
Yeah,
the changing in and since this, if it's gonna be revenue neutral,
Yeah.
We do. We usually,
Yes, I think we
we've been around like, I don't know,
I didn't
between
get it all.
5,000 and 15,000,
Yeah.
at least a
Okay.
year.
All right.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, why didn't,
Show people
okay,
this?
I guess I was expecting you to do it at the public input.
Mobility grant thing.
thought we were doing it
We missed-
when they were
we missed
here.
the deadline
Okay,
on this
I'm
one.
sorry
We
if there
have
was
to
a
start the planning board
misunderstanding.
For next year.
Yeah, it's from the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
Yeah.
It's, could be
Who is
significant.
that?
It's very broad project.
Oh, and she's not here tonight.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
She should, yeah.
I just saw the deadline.
Here's,
Okay.
here's copies, you could pass it around.
We got copies here.
Well, they're on the 14th. Yeah.
We're also told to come tonight and make first statement.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. Well,
Can I at least make it?
Sure.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah,
yes.
By all means.
Yeah, we haven't closed the meeting.
No, we
so
don't.
We haven't adjourned officially.
So I think many of you already know what I'm going to say, or at least some of us. So we've been communicating with Alan, who is our liaison, with Lynn Lipinski, and we've also gone before the Personnel Board. One of the biggest challenges for the Health Department is that we do not have too deep health agent capabilities, which is required by the state. And so what this means is always having a fully trained person available who can respond quickly and effectively during an emergency event. That's required, and several months ago we had proposed a new position to achieve this, and that was going to increase the fiscal year 21 budget. So in light of the freeze on the new positions, we went back and decided to develop a strategy for an internal reorganization that would allow us to proceed with that position within the guideline budget. And we're planning to present this in more detail at the January 14th meeting. So what we're planning to do is, we've actually started, is to re-examine the health department services, special services, and the duties that we're obligated to provide. And what we're aware of is that in the past 5 years, those have changed dramatically. Just the nature of the work that we're doing and the special services that we're providing have changed quite a bit. So that will inform our reorganization. And what we believe is that by streamlining our operation and refining the special service fees to accurately capture the true cost of those special services that were provided, we believe that we can sustain the higher level position and still meet the level budget guideline. So that's what we are proposing.
Yeah, great.
This is what I said.
Yeah.
Already incentivized a lot
Yeah.
of reorganization.
You know, we, like I said, the biggest issue is that we are not meeting the state requirements.
Mhm.
So we don't really have the luxury of doing nothing, at least.
Right.
We agree on that. And I'm not saying it will be easy, and I'm not saying it will be painless, you know, to either our department or to the town, but I do think it's necessary. So we'll come again on the 14th, and I guess in the meantime, we'll just send an email to the FinCom and,
Yeah.
you know, or ask Lynn to share it more broadly.
I would say clearly have the support of the, you know, the board
Yeah,
for
no, I
this
think it's,
initiative.
you know, you can actually take a vacation day now.
No,
So-
but, I mean, but there is, it does involve some detail.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no,
it
I'm
will,
sure it
it
does.
will
Understand that.
affect, you know, staffing hours and that. So you need to understand that, what the real impacts will be.
Yeah, so is this something that you're gonna be doing, sort of through the Board of Health with you, Linda? Are you gonna involve some of the staff that provide some of these?
I'm not sure of the question.
Well, just who's the team that's working on the reorganization plan? Partly I was thinking
The board.
about. it's the
Kathy's
board.
the treasurer.
Yeah.
And actually, years ago, I developed with Linda and with our, was it Judy at the time? We developed a very comprehensive spreadsheet of the special services and the, you know, the special permits. And so we know that the nature of what goes into septic permits, for example, has changed quite a bit. So we're going to go back and reconstruct the We have a spreadsheet that outlines all the tasks and the estimated time for each person involved in that,
Yeah.
and then that rolls up into a fee. So we're going to look at our fee structures, and we will be working, Linda communicates, on this with her two assistants. And so we get the input from the people actually doing the work,
Mhm.
and then we also report back to the board at our board meeting.
And the request has gone to Personnel Board, and they have graded it.
Oh,
And we
good.
will be accommodating what they think, because the point is, we want to make this a more responsible position, capable of
Mhm.
taking my place. So I'll have Health Agent 1, Health Agent 2.
Mhm.
And that's what the state is looking for. And when you were talking about your priorities, it occurred to me that we don't really talk about emergency preparedness, but you're talking about an aging population. Carlisle is a very small town. We have very limited resources of our own. It's critical for Carlisle to play a role in, the state created these public health regions, and we've taken an active part in it. And we not only get funding from them, but that's who we would call upon during an emergency, because we don't have the resources. And I'm thinking of the Merrimack Valley and what happened there. And
Right.
they called on, other members of the region who came and helped them with sheltering, with food, with transportation, things like that. Carlisle needs to play an active role and participate in that. And those are the deliverables that we're trying to meet with this second position.
Terrific.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sounds
good.
fantastic.
Sounds very. So in advance of the January meeting, will we be able to look at something a little bit ahead of time?
We'll try very hard.
That would be good. If you can, I know, it's a lot of work, and good for you all for taking it on.
On the 14th, you want to talk about the mosquito control warrant article too?
Oh, I was afraid you'd ask about that.
Oh, wow, it's not a thing
Okay, so
anymore.
I had asked him to put a placeholder on because the state is asking all communities to be a member of a mosquito control program, which we are not. All of our surrounding towns are.
31.
And so the Board of Health instructed me to start exploring options. And we are a border town, so we could join Central Middlesex Control or Eastern. I did get a proposal from Eastern. It would be about $30,000 annually, but that would include helicopter spraying. If we just did like larviciding of catch basins, maybe wetlands, surveillance, might be around $16,000. There's an initial $6,700 membership initiation.
Oh, I see. So this is, so that's the East Middlesex mosquito?
Eastern Middlesex.
So it's
yeah.
30K for the first year and then 16?
Well, 30 if you wanted helicopter spraying.
Oh, no, we
I
don't.
see.
Okay.
So we don't
Saying
need
it was
it.
like 16 without that.
16 without that, okay,
Yeah,
but I
well,
thought you
yeah.
said there
Would
was an
the 16
initiation.
include the initiation fee?
But that, there was an initial 6,700 in that.
Oh, plus,
So
No,
that,
no, in that 16.
in the
oh,
30?
no, in the
Right.
six,
Now, I don't know if that,
In the
what
16.
In
the
the
ongoing
16.
membership fee is. They didn't break that out.
Okay.
So.
That'd be good to know.
At least you'll have some numbers, and then,
Yeah.
but it requires a
And
town meeting vote
it's a
to join.
requirement, state
not just to
requirement
pay
that we
for it.
join this.
Last time, the town meeting voted it
There-
down big time.
Now,
Many times they
Yeah.
voted.
one of the reasons that we're putting this forward is that if there was a triple E, diagnosis in Carlisle, and we were not affiliated, we might be and if the state ordered that we spray, for example, and we were not affiliated with one of the districts, we might have a very hard time spraying, or we might have to pay a great deal.
Okay, so this is sort of an insurance policy.
Right, and again, it's an initiative by the state, it's not a requirement yet. They are going to try to legislate it, but unlikely they'd get that done this year.
So it's not a requirement yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay.
But then you want to look at the residents. I mean,
No,
the real
definitely.
goal is
Definitely,
protecting
think
the
about,
health of
right,
the residents.
overall.
next year we'll have no AAA anywhere in the state.
So, I guess we'll keep the placeholder until the board makes the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whether to move it.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
Yep.
okay. Okay.
This is from,
This is from David.
Oh.
He sent it to me, but there wasn't time to respond this year
Okay.
anyway, so I didn't.
Yeah.
David,
yes, I saw this
yeah,
too.
yeah.
for the preparedness
And I think,
program.
I don't know, when are we going to, which agenda should we put our, maybe revisit our requests for personnel in the light of the conversation that we just had with FinCom?
Yeah, well, and, and also too, I think, like David presented, and I just asked him to clarify, he said, he talked about 28,000, and he came back with, 10 from the
Yes.
NHS, 6 from the other grant.
16
And then, we could slide those other 2 warrant articles, right? He'd be willing to.
Get rid of the
those
5,500,
and
because
absorb them
frankly, I
somewhere else.
don't think we need that cross-town.
No, so I mean, now all of a sudden you're looking at, what, $1,500? And
Is
you
that
go.
what it was?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically
no,
what it comes
16
down
Is
to.
that what he said?
No, 16 minus 55,
No, it's
So it's
28
11
minus,
hu-
28
it's
minus
28.
16, minus another 10.5 for the 2 warrant articles. So it brings 12 down to.
10.5, with,
he's got
transfer,
last-
oh, the
last two-
transportation
yeah, the
voucher.
last 2 warrant
yeah.
articles.
Oh, yeah, that's 10,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
So-
we had 16, he already had 16 of the 28, which left 12,
12,
and so we're
minus-
talking 2,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I agree, but you see, this is,
But it's getting them to
The
think
only reason
It's
creative.
it's
getting-
happening is because
Right,
well,
Yep.
the answer
this
was
is,
no
I mean,
before.
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's where the creativity
Yeah.
comes from.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, and it's hard because, like like there are these grants available.
Well, yeah,
and-
it's so
and-
interesting, isn't it, how this is.
Suddenly, there's grants, there's fee, we're getting fee
Always another way to do it.
thing, they're finding
Well-
a different way to do things.
Well, there's
but-
no,
And we
you know,
are
there's
too,
no-
we are too.
But that's doing them 1 year at a time.
Right, right.
I understand, but the
Right.
thing is that we've been
Right.
asking for efficiencies for years.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I-
nobody could
I
come up with a
pounded on it.
single one.
Yeah.
So suddenly, this seems to be breaking,
Well, the big change in Board of Health is this too deep argument.
that's true.
Has never come up before.
No, it never
And
has.
and it wouldn't have come up this time if Kathy hadn't brought it up. I think Kathy found it.
Uh-huh.
And they quickly said, this is the justification.
Okay, well, but the thing
But,
is,
but then you say,
that's
okay,
what
how
we've
do I
been
pay
saying,
for it?
make us a
And-
case.
yeah,
Right,
And they
but
do,
we-
and they do.
Yeah.
And we've also been saying, because we've said it to Conscom and Planning Board as well, the number 2 should really be able to fill the role of number 1, and not completely,
Yeah.
but at least enough where
Yes.
if number 1 wants to take a vacation, you
Right.
don't completely lose the
Yeah.
function of that
Right.
group.
Yeah.
for-
And
And-
I think that's graded as 7, I think, out of Personnel Board.
Yes.
yes,
Yeah, and
The
then-
number 2
The number
spot?
2.
yeah, And then,
which
you
is
know,
pretty high.
right,
Yep.
and then we get that succession, right? I mean, ultimately,
Right.
they would be groomed to go into the
Right.
next
And
position.
I think, I don't know where Madeline Blake is with her reorganization plan, but I think
She's
there's
moving
some,
along, yeah.
I
Is she
think
moving
there's
along on it?
some merit
she is.
to it,
Yeah.
and that will also give us some
Yeah.
efficiencies.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but we still also have to think about our positions, because I think we need also to be thinking about how can we do this, get the things that we need to get done in the town, done, without overdoing, costing more than we should.
And things that can't be done by volunteers.
And things that
Right.
can't be done. And I'll tell you, the grant writing cannot be, it's been done by volunteers, but they're all burnt out.
Yeah.
It is very onerous,
Yes.
because it's not just the application, it's all the reporting afterwards.
Right.
Right, so-
And
Right.
And just about,
And it's all the boilerplate.
Yes.
That's
so I think we do need, still
And
need
it's also
that
building
function.
relationships, right? It's like
Yes.
right.
this guy from Eversource
Yes.
being able to basically say, I think I can get,
Right.
green
Right, the
community. I mean,
extension
it's the
for-
same thing, right? When you have somebody that does grant writing and starts to know those networks, it's really
Yeah.
help, it can, you can move things through.
When I worked at a soft money research lab that brought in about 50 million a year, every Friday afternoon, we wrote a grant,
Oh, wow.
Well,
80% of which was boilerplate.
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we even saw with complete streets, right? You know, the initial 40,000 or 30,000, whatever it was, that was basically a letter.
Yeah.
To get 30,000 to pay somebody to put together a complete streets application. I mean, and granted, it took other effort and time, but in the grand scheme of things,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, of course, now it's gonna cost a ton of money. Because they didn't give us the right amount of money, but still, I mean, it's one, it's a process that we wouldn't have even started.
Yeah.
And two, it's 250,000 that's sitting there, here you go, you know, so you leverage it, right?
Look,
Yeah.
you can solve the problem with the complete streets deficit simply by putting parking meters in front of the bank where it is now, instead of doing away with that.
Exactly.
That slot's going. We're not
Well,
gonna have that.
Don't
You're
take it
saying
away,
keep
put
it there,
parking
yeah.
meters in there.
Right. Or
That's
you
actually
put
on their
parking meters
property, though.
along the,
know.
along the, you know,
Yep.
Church and school
We,
street.
oh, well, by
Church
the
and
way,
School Streets,
we do
yeah.
have, that's one of, that's what I'll bring next time, as the parking policy. Do you believe we have a parking
We
policy?
have a parking policy?
Yes.
I do see it in the police blotter every now and then, and somebody got moved because they were parked illegally, but I said, well, I didn't know it was that place you could park illegally in this town.
Yeah, there are many places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm just saying aye, as a formality.
That's when you're supposed to say, ay, 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 ay. Okay.